Welcome to the Shorten Anime channel. Today we'll dive into the latest episode of The Great Ruler. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. The Great Ruler, Season 1, Episode 5. Spiritual movement stage? Many individuals issued a cry in surprise as they looked at the ring. Following that, astonished gazes began to gather at Tan Qingshan. No wonder he dared to challenge Liu Yang, so he too had advanced into the spiritual movement stage. Amazing! Su Ling also had a shocked expression. He stared enviously at Tan Qingshan's back. Currently within the Earth class, there were only 3 individuals that advanced to the spiritual movement stage: Mu Chen, Liu Yang, and Mu Yuan. And now Tan Qingshan was the 4th. Mu Chen also nodded his head slightly. It was evident that Tan Qingshan was quite talented, as he was able to become the #1 individual within the East Branch Earth class before. Most importantly, his family environment wasn't that good. All his achievements was something that he obtained through desperate training. Thus, Mu Chen actually had a favorable expression towards him. A person who earned his own right to be arrogant was someone worthy of respect. Oh, so this is why you have such courage? It turned out you also advanced to the spiritual movement stage. Liu Yang was slightly stunned by Tan Qingshan's aura for a moment. He soon let out a sneer. Tan Qingshan remained silent. His gaze towards Liu Yang gradually became sharp, and the deep yellow spiritual energy on his arm exuded a heavy fluctuation as it rose. Liu Yang stared coldly at Tan Qingshan. He extended a hand and gently curved it. "Let's do this. Don't say that I didn't give you the chance." How arrogant! Seeing Liu Yang act like this, Su Ling and the others cursed at him in anger. Just when Su Ling cursed at him, Tan Qingshan's legs violent stomped onto the ground. His figure rushed out like a cheetah, and the deep yellow flow, mixed with a heavy force, headed straight towards Liu Yang's chest. Liu Yang stared at the approaching Tan Qingshan and issued out a sigh. The fiery red spiritual energy exploded out from his arms. He did not try to avoid, and instead, his fingers clenched into a fist as it bombarded heavily against Tan Qingshan's palms. A deep voice sounded out and blast enveloped the 2 individuals. Dust immediately stirred above the ground, and the 2 bodies trembled. However, Liu Yang did not move at all, while Tan Qingshan took a step back. A serious expression helped stabilize Tan Qingshan's body. The deep yellow spiritual energy on his arms became denser, and his entire arm showed a deep yellow color as if it was a rock. "Mountain Fist!" Tan Qingshan rushed out again. The speed that the arms lashed out was slightly slower, but the heavy force was like a rock slide. This made many people's faces stiffened with dismay. Boom! Tan Qingshan's arms were like a rock. It let out a fast and sharp blast, and waves of offensive were hurled towards Liu Yang, yet Liu Yang's face remained cold. The fiery red spiritual energy seemed to wrap around his arms like a fire, and he forcibly blocked all of Tan Qingshan's attacks. The blast formed by the 2 spiritual energies, as they collide, cleared the entire ring. The people who were nearby even felt pain on their face. Tan Qingshan is pretty good. He is able to fight neck to neck against Liu Yang. Su Ling and the others let out a cry of joy as they watched the fierce battle. However, Tan Qingshan had only reached the spiritual movement stage. It would not be easy for him to defeat Liu Yang. Tang Qian'er gently shook her head. Although she disliked Liu Yang, she still had to admit that he had quite the skill. What Tan Qingshan trained in should be the mountain art. It is a common tier, high-ranked spiritual art from the Northern Spiritual Academy. However, Liu Yang might have trained in the spiritual tier, low-ranked spiritual art, Solar Flame, Mu Chen said as he stared at the ring. Su Ling suddenly let out a sigh of regret when he heard those words. Apparently, he hoped that Tan Qingshan would be able to win. If that were to have happened, then Liu Yang probably wouldn't dare to act so arrogant from now on, right? As they held a conversation with each other, the battle within the ring also became more intense. Tan Qingshan's face seemed to have turned dark red. It was obvious that he had pushed his strength to the limits. The attacks were also become more and more wild. A rock-like punch suddenly soared and smashed heavily towards Liu Yang's belly. However, just when the fist was about to come into contact with Liu Yang's body, Liu Yang moved backwards, using a strange step. He avoided the sharp blow that Tan Qingshan had been plotting for a long time. When his fist was avoided, Tan Qingshan felt that he was careless. He then noticed that the corner of Liu Yang's lips went up and formed a cold smile. Solar Flame Fist! Liu Yang's fingers formed into a palm. He suddenly let out a shot. The fiery red spiritual energy exploded outwards like a flame, and a powerful force and heat erupted out. It directly passed through Tan Qingshan's defense and fiercely landed on his chest. The flame-like spiritual energy exploded outwards when Liu Yang's palms made contact with Tan Qingshan's chest. That enormous energy directly blasted away Tan Qingshan. Under many watchful gazes, Tan Qingshan fell heavily on the ring and immediately spat out blood. Seeing that the situation changed instantly, an uproar suddenly burst out from the surroundings. Tan Qingshan wiped the blood from his mouth and gritted his teeth. Liu Yang's spiritual energy was blazing and domineering. It was many times stronger than the spiritual energy that he had cultivated. Liu Yang stared coldly at the helpless Tan Qingshan. He did not have any intentions of stopping. He pushed off with the tip of his toe, and he charged out like an eagle. A leg lashed out at Tan Qingshan. Tan Qingshan weaved around awkwardly and narrowly avoided Liu Yang's attack. His face was a little bit pale. It was obvious that he did not expect Liu Yang to pursue him relentlessly after he gained the upper hand. However, he also had a stubborn attitude. Since Liu Yang acted so overbearing, he refused to admit his defeat. He only stared fiercely at Liu Yang. So there really is a bit of pride left within you? Seeing this, Liu Yang shook his head and sneered. Hostility appeared within his eyes, and he moved and appeared to the right of Tan Qingshan. Mixed with a blazing spiritual energy, the shadow of his leg flashed and he kicked directly at Tan Qingshan's chest. Tan Qingshan's body skimmed along the ground for about 10 meters. Blood swelled up from his throat again, but he forcibly swallowed it back down. Motherfucker, do you have any sense of shame? You hit him even after he lost. When they saw Liu Yang acting so oppressive, many East Branch students rallied their anger and shouted furiously as well. You bastard! Su Ling also cursed angrily. When Liu Yang heard the condemning shouts from the East Branch, his eyes darkened. Not only did he not stop, he took a big step towards Tan Qingshan and kicked with his leg again. He fired it towards Tan Qingshan as he retreated awkwardly. A deep voice rang out. However, this time Tan Qingshan did not move backwards. This is because a slender figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Liu Yang's sharp leg strike was grasped tightly by that figure's hand. Mu Chen! Tan Qingshan saw the familiar figure and was startled. Are you all right? Mu Chen turned around and asked him. Tan Qingshan shook his head, and the eyes that stared at Liu Yang were still fierce like a wolf. You are already very strong for being able to fight with him when you had just advanced into the spiritual movement stage. If you trained for a while longer, it would not be difficult to catch up to him, Mu Chen said as he smiled. He knew that Tan Qingshan may remain silent on the surface, but his personality was quite stubborn and prideful. This is why he did not tell him to surrender. If he blurted out those words, it would give a considerable blow to Tan Qingshan instead. Thank you. Tan Qingshan's heart calmed down because he heard Mu Chen's words. He stared at the handsome face covered with a brilliant smile and whispered with gratitude, I'll leave this guy to you. However, I will personally defeat him by myself in the future. After he said up to this point, he paused for a moment. He stared at Mu Chen and said, You are stronger than me, so please help the East Branch win the #1 place back. When he finished saying these words, he did not stay here longer. He turned around and jumped off the ring. Mu Chen stared at Tan Qingshan as he jumped off the ring. Afterwards, he turned his head towards Liu Yang, who had a sullen expression, and said, Next up, I will be your opponent. Liu Yang stared at Mu Chen. His mouth cracked open and revealed a sinister smile. Within his eyes, it was filled with ruthlessness and cruelty. I will entertain you well. On the ring, the atmosphere instantly became tense as the two of them confronted each other. Many students directed their gaze over to this side as well. This, right now, is the match between the strongest individuals within the Northern Spiritual Academy Earth class. Around the ring, countless eyes gathered on the two juvenile figures on the ring. Their eyes were filled with expectation. So this is the strongest two individuals within the Northern Spiritual Academy Earth class. That Mu Chen is finally willing to go onto the ring. I am quite curious if he would be a worthy opponent for Liu Yang. At the corner of the West Branch seats, a few boys from the West Branch Heaven class stared at the two figures on the ring. They could not help but laugh. In fact, they were quite curious about Mu Chen. After all, he was the only one who qualified for the spiritual road within the Northern Spiritual Realm. If it wasn't for the fact that he was somehow kicked out of the spiritual road, Mu Chen would probably be at a level where they would not be able to reach right now. Perhaps even a genius like Liu Mubai would be inferior to him. After they thought about this point, they snuck a glance at Liu Mubai, who was in front of them. However, they did not dare to say these words out loud. Hearing those words, the handsome youth let out a faint smile. Within his eyes that stared at the thin boy, a cold radiance was hidden deep inside. The spiritual road is completely based on luck, so there are times that it would make a mistake. It could be possible that the place should have belonged to Brother Liu instead. In the end, a mistake was made, and the place was given to Mu Chen. Otherwise, why would that person be kicked out? A person who was quite compatible with Liu Mubai curled his lips and sneered. The nearby West Branch Heaven-class students nodded their heads as they caught word of this. Although they did not agree within their hearts, it was evident that it was irrational to offend Liu Mubai, who was at the summit of the Northern Spiritual Academy, for Mu Chen, who was kicked out of the spiritual road halfway through. Hong Ling, who do you think have a higher chance of victory? Liu Mubai smiled and asked the charming girl with a red dress beside him. The girl called Hong Ling stared at the ring. Her pretty eyes remained for a moment at Mu Chen's body. At this moment, the boy has straightened his body like a spear, and the previously seen laziness seemed to have disappeared a little. It was replaced by a gradually exposing sharp edge. The little boy back then had definitely changed a lot. They are both at the spiritual movement stage initial phase. Liu Yang trained in the spiritual tier low-rank solar flame that belongs to the Liu territory. However, Mu Chen's father is also a territory lord. The spiritual art that he gave him must not be something ordinary. In this case, they are equal in this category. Hong Ling's eyes wavered. Her somewhat lazy expression was even more charming. However, Liu Yang possesses the human-level spiritual pulse. If he were to activate it, he would have the strength comparable to a spiritual movement stage middle phase. Mu Chen would be in a disadvantaged position due to it. Liu Mubai smiled when he heard those words. He stared at Mu Chen, who was inside the ring, and said, Liu Yang's abilities aren't bad. It wouldn't be injustice if Mu Chen loses to him. Actually, I was curious why he was able to obtain the spiritual road's qualifications. Hong Ling glanced at him for a moment. It seems that Liu Mubai harbored ill feelings to Mu Chen for obtaining the spiritual road's qualifications. He had always been proud of himself and believed that he was the most outstanding person among the young generation within the northern spiritual realm. The spiritual road's qualifications should have landed on him instead, but the final results was somewhat beyond everyone's expectations. If he cannot even defeat Liu Yang here, then the selection of the spiritual road will have truly disappointed me. Liu Mubai gently said as he gripped his hands tightly. A deep hand imprint was actually kneaded onto the railing, made by fine iron, and a chill flowed deep within his eyes. He could not tolerate a useless person for stealing something that originally belonged to him. Brother Mu, good luck. Brother Mu, take back the Earth Class number 1 for the East Branch. The surrounding East Branch students all had an excited expression as they stared at the two individuals facing off. For the past 2 years, the East Branch has always been suppressed by the West Branch. It did not matter whether it was the Heaven Class or Earth Class. They were pressured by the West Branch and could not lift their heads up. And right now, a person finally appeared within the East Branch that could fight against the West Branch. A group of whimsical fellows. When Liu Yang heard these voices, a hint of hostility appeared on his smile. He stared at Mu Chen and said in a mocking voice, I really want to know what splendid expressions they would have when you lose. Facing his taunt, Mu Chen did not have the slightest anger within the face. He only extended his hand out and said as he gave off a shallow smile, You probably don't have that ability. You should know your limits. Anger flashed through Liu Yang's eyes. He grasped his hands tightly, and the flame-like, fiery red spiritual energy wrapped around his arms. In the next moment, he took a step forward, and a subtle sound rang out from below his feet. His body charged out like a cheetah. Wrapped in fiery red spiritual, his fist instantly approached Mu Chen. The spiritual energy oppressed the air and let out a strange crunching sound. Mu Chen's body moved toward the side. The moment the wind from Liu Yang's punch passed through his body, his right hand sprang up. A dark black spiritual energy surrounded his fingertips, and like a sharp knife, it chopped Liu Yang's wrist mercilessly. Mu Chen did not hold back, but Liu Yang definitely had some ability as he was able to become the West Branch Earth Class number 1. He immediately changed his fist into a palm and slashed heavily at Mu Chen, using a backhand hand blade. A deep sound rang out. The two of them took half a step back when the two spiritual energies collided. You actually want to compete with me in terms of density of spiritual energy? Liu Yang let out a cold laugh and stomped with his feet. A fiery red spiritual energy actually wrapped around his legs as well. The strength of this spiritual energy was many times more powerful compared to Tan Qingshan earlier. Swish! Spiritual energy was infused into Liu Yang's legs, and his speed instantly increased. His figure shifted, and others were able to see his body vaguely. By relying on this speed, he was able to let out an extremely ferocious offensive in an instant. Bang, bang, bang! Liu Yang's blurry figure seemed to surround Mu Chen like a whirlwind of fire. Fist, leg, elbow, a mixture of brutal attacks coupled with a savage spiritual energy overwhelmingly enveloped Mu Chen. Outside of the ring, many students made a commotion as they saw Liu Yang instantly let out fierce attacks. Even Tan Qingshan, who was defeated earlier by Liu Yang, had a serious expression. This density of Liu Yang's spiritual energy was probably about to reach spiritual movement stage middle phase. Along with the fact that the spiritual art that he trained was not a common tier, his combat ability was definitely shocking. The excitement on Su Ling and the others' face faded a lot, and a touch of concern appeared within their eyes. They only recovered from their surprise now. That Liu Yang is truly a powerful individual. Don't worry, Mu Chen won't lose that easily. Tang Qian'er's beautiful eyes stared at the ring. After a while, she let out a smile. She had the strength of a spiritual movement stage middle phase, so naturally she would be able to see Liu Yang's speed clearly. Although Liu Yang's attacks were like a tempest, but a blue rock was standing firmly within that tempest. Many eyes were firmly fixed onto the figure within the whirlwind of fire. The figure either avoided or countered the attacks and actually managed to counter all the violent attacks that Liu Yang sent out. That appearance of his seemed to have seen through every single hidden offensive of Liu Yang. As expected from a person that experienced the spiritual road's trial, within the main seat, Principal Xiao stared at the scene, and a hint of admiration passed through his eyes. Mu Chen has an accurate vision and remained calm as he fought against his opponent. This disposition will not be inferior to veterans who have fought hundreds of battles. Teacher Mo also nodded. His words were filled with praise. If his spiritual energy was weak, he would always be able to cultivate it. However, that strong, hardened mind isn't something that could be easily honed. His vision is indeed pretty good. He knows the weakness of Liu Yang's offensive. It could be considered as breaking through strength using techniques. However, there is also a phrase known as a power breakthrough 10 users. By avoiding like this, it is obvious that his spiritual energy isn't as strong as Liu Yang. As long as Liu Yang gathers his energy for one attack, it would be difficult for Mu Chen to deal with it, the thin, middle-aged teacher Shi said nearby. As an instructor, they weren't just powerful, they also had accurate visions. Principal Xiao and Teacher Mo also nodded when they heard these words. The situation was indeed like this. But is Mu Chen currently just taking evasive action? Within the flame whirlwind, a cry suddenly rang out. They could only see Mu Chen suddenly taking action. His two fingers were sharp like an unparalleled dagger, and surrounding it was a dark black spiritual energy. Like a lightning bolt, it penetrated the whirlwind and stabbed onto the swift figure. A cry sounded out. As the whirlwind suddenly became still, a figure staggered back a dozen steps. The clothes located at his shoulder was already destroyed. It was evident that this was caused by Mu Chen's finger. The large commotion suddenly intensified around the ring. Both the East Branch and West Branch students had an astonished expression. It was clear that nobody expected Liu, who was still letting out a fierce offensive earlier, would be repulsed by Mu Chen. You! Liu Yang's face suddenly became depressed, as if tears were about to come out. He stared at Mu Chen and took a deep breath. On his right palm, a fiery red spiritual energy surged out. The fiery red spiritual energy rose like a flame as it gathered on Liu Yang's palm. The spiritual energy quickly shrank, and a palm-sized sun slowly appeared. A violent fluctuation gradually emitted out. The commotion outside of the ring quickly faded away. Many students watched in shock at this scene. It was obvious that Liu Yang has pushed the spiritual energy within his body to its very limits. Mu Chen looked at Liu Yang, who had gone all out. He curled his lips and his eyes instantly turned cold. His two palms swirled and he began to circulate the great pagoda art. Within the Oricea in his body, the dark black spiritual energy quickly trembled and the levels of amplification ripped as it came out. First level, 5th level, 10th level, 13th level. The dark spiritual energy wrapped around Mu Chen's palms. A domineering atmosphere exploded outwards. There were faint signs that it had already surpassed Liu Yang's violent spiritual energy fluctuations. When the spiritual energy amplification has reached the 13th level, Mu Chen did not stop. As he gradually got used to the Great Pagoda art, the amplification limit of the Great Pagoda art wasn't just this much. Mu Chen narrowed his eyes. A razor-sharp edge appeared within them. Within the Oricea, a slight buzzing sound came out. Mu Chen's body violently shook. The 18th level! The dark spiritual energy violently stormed out of Mu Chen's body. The pressure from this powerful spiritual energy instantly suppressed Liu Yang's spiritual energy. What a powerful spiritual energy! Principal Xiao, Teacher Mo, and Teacher Shi all had a surprised expression. This degree of spiritual energy is almost equal to the spiritual energy of a spiritual movement stage middle phase, and they could feel that the dark spiritual energy pouring out of Mu Chen's body contained an overbearing intention. It was clear that this wasn't something that an ordinary spiritual art would possess. Mu Chen, you're seeking your death. When his spiritual energy was actually suppressed, Liu Yang's face also showed some surprise. Then he let out an angry roar and took a step forward. Afterwards, many of the audiences saw that fiery red lights actually lit up on his body. These lights spread throughout his entire body. They could vaguely see a strange vital energy channel rushing out like a snake. Spiritual pulse? Voices broke out around the ring again. They did not imagine that Liu Yang would actually be forced to activate his spiritual pulse. But with this, the situation should be reversed by him again. Following the appearance of the fiery red lights, the fiery red spiritual energy violently expanded on top of Liu Yang's palms, and the originally palm-sized sun doubled in size. At the same time, the spiritual energy surrounding the world seemed to attracted to these lights on Liu Yang's body. It further increased his momentum. Surrounding the ring, many students' expression became serious as they watched this scene. It was obvious that Liu Yang has exhausted all his strength right now. This offensive would definitely be as powerful as a wild lightning. He plans on defeating Mu Chen with this one move. As Su Ling and the others stared at the ring, their expression was filled with nervousness. Beside them, Tang Chen-er's beautiful eyes also became more solemn. Liu Yang's strength was not weak even within the heaven class. I would like to see how you counter this. Liu Yang's face became dark as he directed a smile towards Mu Chen. His body stormed out, and the sun-like fiery red, spiritual energy was so violent that it was glaring. Liu Yang's speed was extremely fast. He seemed to have instantly appeared in front of Mu Chen and fired off a palm. The sun-like spiritual energy on his palm was relentlessly smashed towards Mu Chen. Solar Flame Palm! The violent spiritual energy brought over a gust of wind. It made Mu Chen's clothes flutter as his black hair constantly danced in the sky. Yet there were no signs of anxiety within the black eyes that stared at Liu Yang. Despite all this, you're still trying to pretend at this moment. Go to hell! Under Mu Chen's calm gaze, Liu Yang's heart trembled. The fury within him grew even further. I wonder if you would remain this calm after I step on you in front of everybody here. You still want to step on me? Mu Chen looked at the quickly approaching Liu Yang. He could see the latter's eyes clearly, and his lips slowly erected an arc. It was cold like a blade. Unfortunately for you, you don't have the qualifications to do so. Mu Chen lifted his head boldly. The dark spiritual energy furiously rushed out from his body as he clenched his hands tightly together. The domineering black lights traveled back and forth at his fingers. A powerful fluctuation erupted out. This spiritual energy fluctuation. At the main seats, Principal Xiao and the two other instructors revealed a surprised expression. Spiritual movement stage middle phase? A fierce uproar broke out from the surroundings. This spiritual energy fluctuation revealed that it had truly entered into the level of the spiritual movement stage middle phase. Mu Chen had actually broken through and advanced to the spiritual movement stage middle phase. That boy really has quite the skill. At the West Branch seats, the students from the West Branch Heaven class also had a grave complexion. With the strength of a spiritual movement stage middle phase, he would be rather high up among the Northern Spiritual Academy Heaven class. They lamented within their hearts as they never imagined that an Earth class student would be able to achieve it. To be able to obtain the Spiritual Roads qualification, Mu Chen really had some ability. Liu Mubai's handsome face did not show much movement. His eyes only stared at the ring calmly, and others could not tell whether he is happy or angry. The dark black spiritual energy seemed to flow out of Mu Chen's body like a stream. It wrapped around his right arm completely. He extended his ape-sized arm, and a powerful fluctuation was formed by this fist as it blasted out, collapsing fist. Mu Chen's arm was like a spear that was stretched out to its extreme. It exploded out the most powerful energy it could muster at this short distance. Due to this, the air seemed to be collapsing due to this fist. Although it was only just a common tier, low-rank attack spiritual art, it was like a landslide under Mu Chen's use, as it was mixed with the flowing spiritual energy. Under Liu Yang's slightly changing gaze, it collided fiercely against the violent palm winds. A deep sound suddenly exploded out from the ring. The black and red lights collided viciously with each other, and the airwaves produced by it seemed to make the air tremble. All the eyes were fixed to the point where the spiritual energy intersected. Over there, the black and red lights flashed rapidly. Then soon after this, everybody witnessed two figures retreating a few steps after they made contact with each other. The two figures confronted each other on the ring. One had a dark expression, while the other had a calm expression. They were evenly matched. Everybody looked at each other. The earlier collision was so powerful, yet it did not decide the victor. While everybody was stunned about this, Liu Yang's dark face suddenly became pale. His body curved and fresh blood sprayed out onto the ring. As the fresh blood was expelled out, Liu Yang's imposing manner seemed to have instantly become dispirited. The pale white face made everybody in the surroundings cry out. Liu Yang lost. After they stared at the pale Liu Yang and the calm Mu Chen, everybody was aware of the results of this match. Brother Mu won. Good going, Brother Mu. Haha, we, the East Branch, has finally retrieved back the title of Earth Class number 1. At the East Branch's side, Su Ling and the others stared at this scene. Then a surprised and excited expression emerged on their faces. Cheers resounded out from the sky and instantly suppressed the silent West Branch. Even Liu Yang has lost. This time the West Branch had really lost to the East Branch. Mu Yuan, Zhuodong, and the others from the West Branch, Earth Class, gritted their teeth as they were not able to accept it. However, they had to admit that Mu Chen was definitely powerful. They originally thought that he was only at the spiritual movement stage initial phase. How would have imagined that? This guy would have advanced to the middle phase. After hearing the deafening cheers from the East Branch, Mu Chen also smiled and his tense body gradually relaxed. He stared at the extremely sullen Liu Yang and asked, "There's no need to fight anymore, right?" Liu Yang slowly raised his head and his darkened eyes focused onto Mu Chen. These cheers were like knives that stabbed into his heart, and it trampled on his pride. His mouth twitched as savageness began to accumulate within his eyes. Mu Chen stared at Liu Yang's expression and frowned. Through the immensely vicious trial within the spiritual road, he was able to detect a hint of danger. "I'll kill you!" A hideous expression suddenly appeared on Liu Yang's face. He gripped his hand and a red light seemed to appear within it. An extremely shocking spiritual energy fluctuation began to erupt out violently. At the main seats, the expression on Principal Xiao, Teacher Mo, and Teacher Shi changed. Then Teacher Mo shouted out, "Liu Yang, what are you planning to do?" However, the instant that Teacher Mo shouted out, Mu Chen had dashed over with a cold expression. He charged directly in front of Liu Yang, and a powerful wind appeared from his two fingers, which was wrapped with a dark black spiritual energy. He directly stabbed towards Liu Yang's throat. "You!" Liu Yang never thought that Mu Chen's reaction would be this fast. It seemed that Mu Chen did not show any signs of defending against him. Within Mu Chen's cold eyes, there was actually a cold intent to kill. This killing intent made Liu Yang understood immediately. If the thing within his hand were to activate and kill Mu Chen would also take away his life in the moment before he died. He's using his life to trade for another. A surge of panic appeared within Liu Yang's eyes. Apparently, he did not have the courage to truly trade life with Mu Chen. Thus, he could only grit his teeth and protect his throat using his palms. Mu Chen's fingers were like a sharp dagger. It stabbed directly at Liu Yang's palms, and blood splattered out. As Liu Yang screamed, the red light held within his hand also fell out. Mu Chen's body jumped and caught the red light into his hand. "Return it to me!" When Liu Yang noticed Mu Chen seizing the red light, his face suddenly became pale. Mu Chen ignored his outburst and retreated. Suddenly, the sound of the wind breaking could be heard, and a vigorous spiritual energy fluctuation shot violently towards him like an arrow. The sudden attack made Mu Chen frown. His toes touched the ground, and he nimbly retreated back a dozen steps to avoid the attack. Then he asked at the slender figure appearing from outside the ring with a cold expression, What are you doing? That handsome and slender figure landed beside Liu Yang. It was Liu Mubai. At this moment, he held out his hand and stared expressionlessly at Mu Chen. Hand over that item. Mu Chen let out a cold laugh. He lowered his head to look at the red light within his hand. But when he saw the item within the red light, his mouth gently lifted up. As expected from the little young master of the Liu territory, you are able to bring out even this item. The change in the ring occurred in a split second. When many people recovered, they noticed that Liu Mubai had already appeared in the ring. Their faces instantly became surprised. What is this situation? Mu Chen did not care about the expressionless Liu Mubai. He only lowered his head to stare at his hand. The red light faded away and it revealed a fiery red bead at the size of a longan. The surface of the bead was filled with an obscure pattern. Within it, a violent spiritual energy seemed to flow like a tidal stream. Spirit destruction bead. Mu Chen's slender fingers pressed against the smooth red marble. He let out a faint smile, only that the smile was a little bit cold. The spirit destruction bead was not something that is used for self-cultivation. It was an extremely destructive spiritual artifact. When a powerhouse reached a certain degree of strength, they would be able to compress that immense spiritual energy within this tiny bead. Then the user would only need to activate it and an extremely powerful spiritual energy attack would burst out. Creating the spirit destruction bead requires a special metal called spirit gold. This metal is extremely expensive. Coupled with the fact that creating the spirit destruction bead requires precise control and it has a high rate of failure, the spirit destruction bead was rather rare. Looking at the one within Mu Chen's hand, the extent of the spiritual energy being condensed was strong, even to cause a grave injury to a person at the spiritual rotation stage. This Liu Yang wanted to kill him. Return it back to me. Liu Yang became clear-headed at this moment, and his face became even paler. He knew that his behavior broke the rules, and if he was punished, it would not be light. Therefore, he immediately glared fiercely at Mu Chen and extended his hand. Big brother, hurry and snatch that item back. Don't let him have the evidence. When he heard Liu Yang's words, Liu Mubai's eyes flashed. After all, their status wasn't low. If there wasn't any evidence within Mu Chen's hand, they would be able to get through it. If you dare move recklessly, this spirit destruction bead might explode on your body. Before Liu Mubai was able to take any action, Mu Chen smiled and said with the spirit destruction bead tucked between his fingers. This time, Liu Yang was indeed a bit too reckless. Return the spirit destruction bead back to him. You should do others a favor sometimes, and it would benefit both of you. Wouldn't you say? Liu Mubai's eyes became serious and he stared at Mu Chen as he slowly spoke. Mu Chen declined to commit on it and let out a smile. What is this all about? At this moment, Teacher Mo also stepped onto the stage. He stared at the three people and shouted out. When Liu Yang noticed Teacher Mo appearing over here, his face instantly became white. He stared fiercely at Mu Chen and attempted to threaten him to keep his mouth shut. However, Mu Chen completely ignored his threat. He lifted up the spirit destruction bead towards Teacher Mo. Teacher Mo stared at the spirit destruction bead within Mu Chen's hand. His face instantly turned grim, and he turned his sight towards Liu Yang. Anger could be heard within his voice as he shouted, "You actually dared to use the spirit destruction bead during the match? Spirit destruction bead?" Many students were paying attention to this side. When they heard the words spirit destruction bead, they instantly made a big commotion. He really is shameless. He actually brought out the spirit destruction bead. As expected from the young master from the largest territory in Northern Spiritual Realm, how rich, oh ho ho. Sounds of fury and sneers came from the surrounding audience. Liu Yang's face also became unusually hideous. This time, he really shamed his own family as well. At this moment, Principal Xiao and the West Branch's teacher Shi also rushed over here. Teacher Mo went over to explain the situation a bit, and everybody noticed Principal Xiao's expression becoming more disgusted. Principal, Liu Yang only did this on an impulse. However, he did not harm anyone. This matter should be excusable. Liu Mubai hurried and said when he noticed this, Senior Liu, are you trying to say that it should be considered inexcusable only after I was seriously wounded by his spirit destruction bead? Mu Chen let out a slight smile and said, Liu Mubai's eyes glanced coldly at Mu Chen, and he said, What do you want then? It is not what I want, but the Northern Spiritual Academy has rules within it. We should deal with this matter in accordance to the rules, Mu Chen said with a casual smile. Liu Mubai's eyes flashed, but just when he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Principal Xiao. Principal Xiao looked at Teacher Mo and Teacher Shi and asked, How should we deal with this situation? Based on the rules, Liu Yang would be disqualified from ascending to the heaven class this time. Teacher Mo thought for a while and said, Liu Yang's face instantly changed. If he could not ascend to the heaven class, he would not be able to compete for a place within the 5 great academies. This would be a fatal blow to him. Isn't this a bit too serious? There aren't many individuals within our Northern Spiritual Academy that has the qualifications to compete for the 5 great academy spots. Teacher Shi pondered for a moment. Then he lowered his voice and said, and if this were to happen, Liu Yang's father probably would not let it go. Although we, the Northern Spiritual Academy, may not fear this, but it would still be troubling if we form a bad relationship with the #1 territory within the Northern Spiritual Realm. However, Mu Chen's father is also the Mu territory's lord. If we let this go, the Mu territory might be quite angry with us. Teacher Mo also said out loud. Principal Xiao shook his head helplessly. If they were just ordinary students, then it would not be so troubling. However, both of them are the sons of territory lords within the Northern Spiritual Realm. It would not be good for them to favor one over the other. Oh ho ho, Mu Chen! Principal Xiao suddenly looked at Mu Chen, who was beside them. He smiled and said, about this matter right now, would you say... Mu Chen saw Principal Xiao smile and he knew what the latter was trying to say. He immediately smiled and said, Principal, Liu Yang was indeed quite rash this time. However, I am willing to forgive since I wasn't hurt. After they heard Mu Chen's words, not only was Principal Xiao stunned, even Liu Yang was shocked. It was evident that he did not expect Mu Chen would let him go like this. However, when he saw Mu Chen smile, his heart suddenly calmed down. This boy may look mild normally, but his methods were extremely ruthless. He still remembered about the ruthlessness he showed when Mu Chen snatched away his spirit destruction bead through the act of trading lives. However, he still violated the rules. How about this? I'll treat this spirit destruction bead as an apology gift and will not return it to him. Then I will not make a fuss about this issue. Mu Chen smiled as he said. He knew that this matter was troubling to Principal Xiao and the others. However, he also knew that it wouldn't have much effect if he were to keep at it. If that's the case, he might as well take advantage of this and sell a favor to Principal Xiao at the same time. You! When Liu Yang heard that Mu Chen actually wanted to take his spirit destruction bead, his eyes popped out in anger. The spirit destruction bead was made personally by his father and was something left to him in order to protect his life when necessary. It was an extremely valuable item. You're not willing? Then let's just punish you according to the rules. Mu Chen glanced at Liu Yang and said helplessly. The corner of Liu Yang's eyes jumped. He could only hold it in. Although the spirit destruction bead was valuable, it was nothing compared to a place within the 5 great academies. Oh, since you've taken a fancy to the spirit destruction bead, we will give it to you. It was apparent that Liu Mubai was more calculating than Liu Yang. He took a deep look at Mu Chen and said with a faint smile. Mu Chen smiled as he glanced at him. Although Liu Mubai hid it very well, he could see a hint of resent within his eyes. This guy is definitely more troubling than Liu Yang. Since Mu Chen would not make a fuss about it, then this matter will be over now. However, if Liu Yang dares to do this again in the future, the Northern Spiritual Academy will not care who your father is and handle it according to the rules. When Principal Xiao noticed that Mu Chen was willing to remain silent on this, his heart was slightly relieved. Since he did not have to be troubled about this matter, his favorability towards Mu Chen increased slightly. Then he immediately said in a strict voice towards Liu Yang. Liu Mubai's face changed from red and green alternately. He did not dare say anything more. Although the Northern Spiritual Academy maintains neutral within the Northern Spiritual Realm, they were not afraid of the Liu territory. Thank you, Principal. Liu Mubai smiled. Then he extended a hand towards Mu Chen and said, I have to thank you as well, Junior Mu Chen. That's right. You will be a heaven class student soon. I am quite interested in you, so I hope that I would have an opportunity to have an exchange with you in the future. His handsome face had a smile plastered on it. However, a few individuals were able to perceive a dark, cold chill swirling in the depths of his eyes. Senior Liu, you're joking with me. Mu Chen stared at Liu Mubai. A sunny smile emerged on his thin and handsome face as well. He extended his hand to shake with Liu Mubai. Then he retracted it back. His eyes still showed calmness deep inside. Liu Mubai was indeed outstanding, and he also knew how to endure it silently. However, he was still inferior to the monsters within the spiritual road, who would smile harmonious for one moment and would not hesitate to kill in the next moment. In the ring, the two of them shook hands. Although both of them had a smile, The ones that are sensitive were able to faintly feel a confrontation underneath this peacefulness. That Mu Chen really is quite amazing. He actually did not retreat back in front of Brother Lu. Not far away, the West Branch Heaven-class seniors watched the scene. They could not help but mutter this. Even without mentioning about Mu Chen's strength, just by having the courage to stand against Liu Mubai was shocking enough. In the future, this person will rise up in our Northern Spiritual Academy Heaven class. It will probably become livelier. Hong Ling rolled her black hair a bit. She stared at the boy standing in front of Liu Mubai in the ring. The boy's slender body, handsome face, and disposition was completely different than the lazy boy in the past. This gap entranced her slightly. Without her knowing, the person that she neglected had actually become this outstanding. After the matter about Liu Yang had calmed down, Principal announced the results of this academy competition on the spot. The East Branch naturally was in the center of attention. Mu Chen, Liu Yang, Tan Qingshan, and the others Earth-class members that had advanced into the spiritual movement stage successfully ascended to the Heaven class. Mu Chen watched as the academy competition ended, and he stretched his waist. He was getting closer to the 5 great academies. The grudge that he had not settled in the spiritual road, he will resolve it during the 5 great academies. Mu Chen lifted his head and stared at the blue sky. He let out a chuckle. Ji Xuan, this time, let us have a good fight. The curtains gradually closed for the academy competition. However, the after effects created by the academy competition continued to envelop the Northern Spiritual Academy. For a few days, the entire Northern Spiritual Academy was discussing about that fierce battle at the academy competition. In the Northern Spiritual Academy, Mu Chen would always remain modest. If it wasn't because of the matter regarding about the spiritual road, perhaps many students wouldn't even pay attention to him. Although he had quite a powerful background, there was still a bit of gap in terms of reputation when you compare it with a dazzling figure like Liu Yang. Before the match between Mu Chen and Liu Yang, many individuals did not feel that Mu Chen was promising, but something unexpected appeared in front of their eyes. Mu Chen, who seemingly remained a low profile, triumphantly defeated Liu Yang. He managed to successfully ascend to the Heaven class with the title of Earth class number 1. Moreover, everybody knew that he would be able to have a decent rank in the Northern Spiritual Academy Heaven class with his spiritual movement stage middle phase strength. This shocked many individuals. Only now they felt that it wasn't so unbelievable for Mu Chen to be able to obtain the only one spiritual roads qualification within the Northern Spiritual Realm. At the Northern Spiritual Academy, the Heaven class could be considered the gathering place for all the outstanding students. In other words, the weakest members of the Heaven class would still have the strength of a spiritual movement stage initial phase. Every single student would treat Heaven class as their goal. This is because it was the only path to enter the 5 great academies. They would only be qualified to compete for a place within the 5 great academies if they ascend to the Heaven class. The selection for the 5 great academies was extremely harsh. The first condition was that the student must have reached the spiritual rotation stage before the age of 18. Just this one condition, many youth dreams were stopped. Within the current Heaven class in the Northern Spiritual Academy, there are probably no more than 5 individuals who reach this requirement. Therefore, you could see how terrifying the acceptance conditions are for the 5 great academies. Despite the harsh conditions, many talented youths would flock to it like moths flying towards a flame. This is because of the powerful might of the 5 great academies. Even Mu Chen knew clearly about it. Even this vast northern spiritual realm was less than an ant in the eyes of the 5 great academies. The territory lords at this place were at most at the level of a spirit stage. This strength would probably be easily surpassed by any instructor inside the 5 great academies. Moreover, genuine sovereign powerhouses exist in the 5 great academies. These individuals are big shots that could easily upturn the world. If they would like to emerge out of the countless geniuses throughout the great thousand world, even gifted youths like Mu Chen would not be able to become someone big without proper guidance. Even the most unrefined diamond would only shine through a master's careful engraving. This high-end cultivation guidance was something that neither the Northern Spiritual Academy nor Mu Chen's father could give him. Based on Mu Feng's description, if Mu Chen's mother was by his side, perhaps she could do it, but unfortunately. So the 5 great academies was a stepping stone for becoming strong. Oi, the 2 of you should hurry. You're heading for the first time to train at the Heaven class today, yet you are still fooling around. At a gravel road covered by trees' shadows inside the Northern Spiritual Academy, Tang Xian'er muttered as she stared in dissatisfaction towards the two boys behind her. Mu Chen looked at the slim figure of Tang Xian'er and said lazily, "Why are you so impatient? Isn't there still some time?" "You idiot! All the good locations would be taken at the cultivation field since you're so slow." Tang Xian'er batted an eye at Mu Chen and spoke. Mu Chen helplessly shook his head. Beside him, Tan Qingshan scratched his head and said, "Mu Chen, let's listen to Senior Qian'er and speed up a bit." He stared at the graceful and exquisite figure of the girl, and his stern expression turned slightly red. Mu Chen glanced at his red face in surprise. He could not help but laugh and say, "Do you like Sister Qian'er?" Tan Qingshan's face instantly turned red. Sweat began to emerge on his forehead. Bang! Before Mu Chen had a chance to say more, he noticed Tang Xian'er turning back and walking over here in anger. Her slender leg was raised and she directly kicked Mu Chen's knee. "If you keep talking nonsense, do you believe that I will hit you?" Tang Xian'er raised her eyebrow and asked. The pain coming from his knee made Mu Chen grin. However, he seemed to have noticed that the girl was a bit angry from the fact that she raised her eyebrow. He immediately let out a dry cough and quickly said, "Let's go. Let's hurry to the cultivation field." Tang Xian'er let out a quiet "Humph." She walked forward again while she talked. "You two have only just entered the Heaven class, so you are still considered to be newbies. In the future, you should be more attentive. The Heaven class is quite troublesome, and there are many irritating individuals. Although your father may be the Mu Territory Lord, many individuals would not care about it within the Northern Spiritual Academy. Sister Qian'er, do I look like a person who enjoys using my father's identity to oppress others?" Mu Chen chuckled and said. Tang Xian'er thought for a moment, then she nodded. Mu Chen never did mention about his father's identity. The reputation he had within the Northern Spiritual Academy was earned by himself. "It's best if you know it," Tang Xian'er chided. "You should also know that you should not tease those old farts in the Heaven class. They are not qualified to continue higher, but this is why it is a hassle." Mu Chen nodded. He knew what Tang Xian'er was referring to by those old farts. It was the veteran students that have not left the Northern Spiritual Academy and are already disqualified from entering the 5 Great Academies. Because these students failed to reach the spiritual rotation stage by 18, they lost the qualifications to enter the 5 Great Academies. Without this goal, there were some that muddle around aimlessly like a mixed taste that hasn't departed from your mouth yet. It was these individuals who do not care about the Northern Spiritual Academy's rules. Thus, in most cases, very few were willing to provoke them. "I do not like to provoke others." Mu Chen shook his head and did not say anything more. However, Tang Qian'er understood the meaning behind those words as they were quite close. He would not provoke others, but if others were to provoke him, this seemingly good-natured boy would let them understand a person isn't like their appearance. "Relax, I will protect you. Within the East Branch Heaven class, I was never afraid of anyone." Tang Qian'er smiled tenderly. The girl's smile was like a flower. It was quite moving. Seeing their informal conversation, Tan Qingshan could not get a word in, and he could only just follow them. The three of them walked towards the east side of the Northern Spiritual Academy. 10 minutes later, they finally stopped. They stared directly in front. Located there was an enormous Great Hall. Outside of the Great Hall, there was a crowd of students hurrying inside. Mu Chen stared at the Great Hall, and a touch of surprise passed through his eyes. At the location, he could feel that the spiritual aura within the world seemed to be attracted and gathered at the center of the Great Hall continuously. The spiritual aura within the world seemed to be many times denser compared to the outside. "Is this a spirit convergence array?" Mu Chen asked. Tang Qian'er nodded and said with a prideful voice, "This cultivation hall is an important location for the Northern Spiritual Academy. Only the Heaven class students are qualified to enter this place. The Northern Spiritual Academy paid a great price in order to invite a Spirit Array Master from the 5 Great Academies to arrange a 3rd-rank Spirit Convergence Array inside this cultivation hall. This is also the only 3rd-rank Spirit Convergence Array in the Northern Spiritual Realm." "A 3rd-rank Spirit Convergence Array?" Mu Chen smacked his lips. A Spirit Convergence Array was a spiritual array that is extremely beneficial for cultivation. As the young master of the Mu territory, he naturally understood the value of a 3rd-rank Spirit Convergence Array. This level of spiritual array was not something that the Mu territory could arrange. Without mentioning about the enormous amount of rare ingredients it required, Even a spiritual array master wasn't something that many forces could afford in the Northern Spiritual Realm. The Northern Spiritual Academy must have performed many favors in order to invite one over. It is said that there are spirit convergence arrays at the 6th rank or higher in the 5 great academies. The cultivation speed at those locations is simply incomparable, Tan Chenner said with a longing voice. A 3rd rank spirit convergence array was already this amazing. Then it was impossible to imagine how amazing a legendary 6th rank spirit convergence array would be. When you enter the 5 great academies, you will naturally be able to experience it. Come on, let's enter now. Mu Chen smiled and he led them inside the most precious hall within the Northern Spiritual Academy. After passing through the heavily guarded doors, a vast plaza appeared in their eyes. Many stone pillars with complex spirit engravings were positioned inside the plaza. As the lights flashed, the spiritual aura within the world was gathered at this location. Oh! Mu Chen gently let out a light breath. He could feel the rich spiritual aura entering his body through his breath and could not help but letting out a praise. It truly is a 3rd rank spirit convergence array. The cultivation time is about to come. Let's hurry inside. The closer you are to the spiritual array, the denser the spiritual aura would be. We must find a good position. As she pulled Mu Chen, Tang Xian'er walked quickly with Tan Qingshan to the inside off the cultivation field. There were already numerous heaven-class students at the cultivation field. It was apparent that Tang Xian'er's reputation was quite big within the East Branch heaven class. Many people shot a gaze over as they saw her actions. Who is that boy? He's actually getting so close to Tang Xian'er. Oh, you don't even know him? He is that Mu Chen. A few days ago at the Academy competition, he defeated Liu Yang and ascended to the heaven class with the title of the Earth class #1. It is said that this Mu Chen has already reached the spiritual movement stage middle phase. Spiritual movement stage? Middle phase? That's quite amazing. He would be rather high up within the heaven class with that level of strength. He's pretty good. However, it is not enough to become fearless within the heaven class. Who knows how many people like Tang Xian are over here. Zhang Li, Teng Yong are also both at the spiritual movement stage middle phase. This boy will probably cause a lot of trouble. While these people spoke, they stared at the other direction within the cultivation field. A few figures were quietly sitting cross-legged over there. However, their face seemed to have slightly darkened, and they stared sullenly at the source that caused this. It was Tang Xian'er, pulling Mu Chen. As Mu Chen was pulled by Tang Xian'er, he glanced around the location and saw the numerous gazes. He immediately let out a helpless smile. It seems that he underestimated Tang Xian'er's popularity within the East Branch Heaven class. Let's sit over here. Tang Xian'er ignored the gazes coming from the cultivation field as she pulled Mu Chen directly inside the cultivation hall. Then she stopped at a location near a golden stone pillar. Beside the stone platform that extended from the stone pillar, there were 3 jade-like rock cushions. Mu Chen looked around, but his eyes still remained at the golden stone pillar. Following this, he was shocked. This is because he could feel a dense spiritual aura emitting from the golden stone pillar. It was evident that this golden stone pillar should be one of the many spirit convergence pillars of the rank 3 spirit convergence array. The effects of a place near the spirit convergence pillar were definitely better than anywhere else. This spirit convergence pillar was probably created by spirit convergence rocks. It indeed is a rank 3 spirit convergence array. Mu Chen let out a praise. The spirit convergence rock was a material beneficial to cultivation, and the price was not cheap. The cost of creating a spirit convergence pillar completely through spirit convergence rocks would be quite high. No wonder many people would treat spirit convergence array as a sign of wealth. Tang Xian'er nodded and sat down cross-legged. Then she extended her slender arms and puffed up her chest slightly. As her clothes showed a charming curve, it made many individuals sneak a peek at her. Qingshan, you should also start cultivating over here. Mu Chen also sat down and directed a smile at Qingshan. He knew this cultivation spot was probably pretty good, and many would want to fight for it. However, he was not afraid. Although he did not want to be overly well known, he would not act low-key purposely and insult himself. Mu Chen's butt set onto the jade rock cushion. He felt the surrounding spiritual aura become more and more dense. This made him immediately circulate the great pagoda art. Traces of spiritual aura were absorbed into his body continuously. It turned into dark black spiritual power after it was refined by the great pagoda art and flowed into his aura C. The spiritual aura inside gradually became more vigorous. Even with Mu Chen's calmness, this clear increase of spiritual energy made him feel joy within his heart. Then he was immersed completely in cultivation. Beside him, Tang Qian'er noticed that Mu Chen had directly entered into the cultivation state. She pouted slightly and then closed her eyes and began the cultivation process. But their cultivation state did not last long before it was disrupted by a noisy sound from the outside world. Mu Chen was the first one to open his eyes. He looked at his left towards Tan Qingshan. However, he noticed that the boy had a ghastly pale face. His hands were clenched tightly, and it was obvious that he was suppressing his anger greatly. In front of the boy, there were two slightly old youths. They were laughing and would point at Tan Qingshan from time to time. "What are you doing?" Mu Chen frowned and said with a cold voice as he looked at the two youths. The two youths noticed Mu Chen and frowned as well. One of them let out a faint smile and extended a hand over. "So you're Mu Chen? I've heard your name a long time ago. I'm Zhang Li, and he's Teng Yong." Mu Chen stared at the hand extended by Zhang Li. However, he did not stretch his hand to shake it. From the latter's eyes, he noticed a hint of hostility. "What do you want?" Seeing that Mu Chen did not react, Zhang Li and the Teng Yong's faces were quite unnatural. They immediately pointed at Tan Qingshan and smiled. "Nothing. We only wanted to exchange locations with him. We're not changing. Next time, you should come here earlier and take it." Mu Chen faintly spoke. "Zhang Li, what are you doing?" At this moment, Tang Qian'er also woke up. When she saw this scene, her beautiful eyes revealed anger. She shouted out as she lifted her eyebrow. Zhang Li shrugged his shoulders and said, "Qian'er, you should know the rules of this cultivation field. This location isn't a recently arrived newbie can sit in. In order to avoid others from being jealous, I was doing this for his own good," Zhang Li said and glanced at Mu Chen. Although they disliked Mu Chen, they also knew that Mu Chen wasn't someone they should provoke. His strength wasn't any bit inferior to them, and his background was not weak. Therefore, they did not cause trouble for Mu Chen directly, and instead picked on Tan Qingshan, who was beside him. It was evident that he was planning to strike at Mu Chen indirectly through this. "You!" Tang Qian'er's eyes were filled with rage. She was about to speak, but was interrupted by Mu Chen. The latter frowned at Zhang Li and Teng Yong. He seemed to have thought for a moment before saying, "I know that only powerful individuals are qualified to sit in this position. I believe that I possess this right. Tan Qingshan is my friend, so that is why he sat over here. If you have any opinions regarding about this, or if you want to show off your strength in front of me, I'll accompany you." Their movements made many people watch them. Thus, Mu Chen's remarks also entered their ears completely. A commotion rang out instantly. This newcomer sure was amazing. Zhang Li and Teng Yong's faces gradually turned unsightly as the commotion rang out. It was evident that they did not expect the seemingly mild Mu Chen would act so tough. They stared furiously at Mu Chen's serious expression, but they did not dare to shout at him. They heard about the battle between Mu Chen and Liu Yang. Liu Yang, who possesses a spiritual pulse, was someone that they weren't sure that they could beat, yet Mu Chen succeeded. Therefore, they did not have any confidence that they would be able to defeat Mu Chen. Oh, as expected from the Mu territory's young master. He really is prideful when he speaks. Just when Zhang Li and Teng Yong had no way of backing down, a uncomforting laughter sound suddenly came from behind. Zhang Li and Teng Yong looked, and a hint of happiness lit up in their eyes. "Big brother Luo!" When he heard their surprised voices, Mu Chen also tilted his head. He only noticed a figure slowly walking over. That figure was around 18 years old with sunken eyes, and his thin lips revealed a hint of mercilessness. "Luotong!" Tang Qian'er stared at this person, and her face sank slightly as she spoke. "Luotong?" Mu Chen frowned. This name was not new to him. This is because this guy's father was also a territory lord within the northern spiritual realm. However, Luotong already passed 18 years old last year, yet his current strength remained at spiritual movement stage late phase. In other words, he had already lost the right to enter the 5 great academies. This also means that he was an old fart that Tang Qian'er mentioned before, and was an extremely troubling individual. "Mu Chen, it's been a while." Luotong arrived in front of Mu Chen and smiled. However, this smile was not kind and gentle. The two of them knew each other from a long time ago, but they disliked each other. Mu Chen glanced at him and said, "So you also came here to put on the airs?" "How could I possibly dare to do that? You are a genius that obtained the qualifications for the spiritual road." Luotong curled his lips and pretended to be surprised. However, the jealousy within his voice could not be concealed. When he first heard that Mu Chen obtained the qualifications for the spiritual road, he was so jealous that his eyes turned red. Moreover, he is currently 18, yet he failed to reach the spiritual rotation stage. This cut apart his wish of entering the 5 great academies. When he thought about Mu Chen's talent and that it wouldn't be difficult for him to enter the 5 great academies, the flames of jealousy raged within his heart. Mu Chen retracted his gaze and was too lazy to care about this jealous and pitiful guy. Compared to Liu Mubai, this Luo Tong was nothing. Hand over your seat. When Luo Tong saw that Mu Chen ignored him, the anger in his eyes grew. However, he did not directly challenge Mu Chen. Instead, he let out a cold shout towards Tan Qingshan. Whether it was strength or background, it was obvious that he did not put Tan Qingshan in his eyes. Luo Tong, you shouldn't go too far. Mu Chen's voice became colder. What? You're unwilling to listen? You want to fight with me? Luo Tong also let out a cold smile as he spoke. He was at the spiritual movement stage late phase. Therefore, he was not afraid of Mu Chen at all. Instead, he wanted to stir up Mu Chen's fury and take care of this person, who made him jealous. Mu Chen's black eyes stared at Luo Tong. When Luo Tong saw those unfathomable black eyes, Luo Tong's imposing manner actually paused for a moment. It did not matter how jealous he got. He still understood what it represented when Mu Chen obtained the qualification for the spiritual road. If it wasn't because Mu Chen was suddenly kicked out of the spiritual road, he probably wouldn't have the qualification to yell in front of Mu Chen. His imposing manner paused for a moment, but Luo Tong quickly recovered. No matter what Mu Chen experienced, he was still a person at the spiritual movement stage middle phase. He simply wasn't his opponent. Do you dare? Luo Tong turned his embarrassment into fury and said, Luo Tong, what are you doing? Before Mu Chen replied, a deep voice rang out from nearby. Everybody looked over and noticed a tall, burly figure approaching quickly. He then stood in front of Luo Tong and shouted out, Mo Ling, don't you think you're too controlling? Luo Tong stared at the burly boy in front of him and frowned. The person in front of him was a celebrity in the Northern Spiritual Academy. His ranking is only second to the West Branch Heaven classes, Liu Mubai. Right now, he is also at the spiritual movement stage late phase, but he would most likely break through to the spiritual rotation stage in half a year. When that happens, he would be eligible to compete for a place at the 5 great academies. He is someone who was the Northern Spiritual Academy would focus on nurturing. It will soon be the cultivation lesson. If you cause trouble here, Teacher Mo would not forgive you. It seemed that Mo Ling did not like Luo Tong as well, and he lifted an eyebrow as he spoke. Luo Tong's face instantly became ugly. However, he knew that Mo Ling did not fear him, so he could only bitterly grit his teeth. At this moment, a figure slowly entered the cultivation field. Everybody fell silent when they saw that figure. This is because it was Teacher Mo. When Luo Tong noticed Teacher Mo's appearance, he did not dare to keep at it and raised a fist toward Mu Chen. Then he returned back to his seat unwillingly. Are you okay? That person is quite annoying. You just have to get used to it. When Mo Ling noticed that Luo Tong departing, he smiled and asked Mu Chen, We're fine. Thank you. Mu Chen smiled kindly and replied, It's fine. I've heard about you before. You are the only one that qualified for the spiritual road. Oh ho ho. It seems like I'll have some pressure from now on. Mo Ling smiled and waved his hand. Then, without saying anything more, he turned around and left. Mu Chen stared at the back of Mo Ling and smiled. He had a good impression of that burly boy. Mu Chen, thank you. Tan Qingshan also showed some gratitude as he spoke. We came here together, so we should take care of each other. Just ignore those individuals. You will become stronger than them soon. Mu Chen gave a faint smile. Tan Qingshan nodded strongly. At this moment, Teacher Mo had always walked leisurely into the cultivation field. He glanced at Mu Chen, but he did not say anything at all. He only waved his hand and numerous lights flew directly into the stone pillars. Afterwards, everybody was able to feel that the spiritual aura within the cultivation field becoming denser. It was obvious that Teacher Mo had completely activated the spirit convergence array. Mu Chen felt the rich spiritual aura and smiled. Without saying anything, he closed his eyes and entered the cultivation state again. He absorbed the spiritual energy into his body and refined it. The cultivation time of half a day quickly passed. Just when Mu Chen absorbed the final trace of spiritual energy into his aura sea and was about to end his cultivation, his body suddenly trembled violently. A wonderful feeling emitted from his aura sea. Mu Chen was startled by this sudden feeling for a moment. Shortly after, A surprised feeling surged through his mind. Did the great pagoda art reach the foundation level? Surprise surged through Mu Chen's mind. It was evident that this sudden breakthrough was completely outside his expectation. He originally thought that it would take at least 10 days before he broke through to the foundation level. Mu Chen was surprised for a while. However, he gradually calmed down and did not dare to be careless. He hurried to recover his focus and began to sense the wonderful feeling vigilantly. Within his aura C, the dark black spiritual energy was bubbling. While it was bubbling, Mu Chen was able to feel that the density of the spiritual energy was increasing rapidly. Moreover, Mu Chen was able to sense that a powerful absorption seemed to have erupted inside his body, and it greedily sucked in the spiritual aura outside. After being refined by the great pagoda art, traces of dark black spiritual energy entered his aura C. While he was sensing the rapidly increasing spiritual energy within his aura C, a comfortable feeling flowed through Mu Chen's four limbs. And while Mu Chen was immersed in the pleasurable feeling of the spiritual art's breakthrough, the entire cultivation field also suddenly stirred. This is because everybody was able to feel a powerful suction erupting from within Mu Chen's body. It used an arrogant and forceful attitude to steal the dense spiritual aura within the cultivation field. This movement instantly attracted everybody's attention. Many individuals glanced through the field with astonished eyes, and it landed at Mu Chen's body in the end. What's happening? It was caused by that Mu Chen. What is he doing? What a domineering absorption. He is actually to absorb the spiritual aura of the world this outrageously? Is he not afraid of dying? Numerous whispers exploded throughout the cultivation field. Everybody had an alarmed expression. It was evident that it was their first time seeing this situation. Mu Chen! Tang Qianer also widened her eyes and stared worriedly at Mu Chen. Do not panic. At this moment, Teacher Mo's calm voice rang out. It overshadowed the whispers and calmed many heaven-class students. Then he turned his gaze towards Mu Chen and frowned slightly as he said, "It's not a big deal. The spiritual art he trained in had a breakthrough." The spiritual art he trained in? Many students were stunned once again. A spiritual art's breakthrough would actually cause such a commotion. Just what is the level of the spiritual art that Mu Chen trained in? It seems to be a spiritual art that it is at least spiritual rank middle tier. Zhang Li and Teng Yong both had a shocked expression as they stared at Mu Chen, who caused this great commotion. A hint of panic flowed through their eyes. Although they were also at the spiritual movement stage middle phase, they could feel the enormous pressure coming from Mu Chen's body. It seems that his father prepared a pretty good spiritual art for him. Luo Tong let out a cold His words were filled with unwillingness and jealousy. The spiritual art that he trained in wasn't weak. It had reached the spiritual rank low tier. But it seems that there was still a gap between the one that Mu Chen trained in. This made Luo Tong extremely frustrated. Compared to Mu Chen, he did not have any points that he would excel at, aside from age. Teacher Mo carefully watched Mu Chen, who was greedily sucking in the spiritual aura. He could not help but let out a sound of praise. He was able to sense that the Gongfa spiritual art Mu Chen trained in was not something ordinary. However, he was different than a shallow person like Luo Tong. As the spiritual art becomes higher in rank, it would become harder to train. A breakthrough would be something even harder. Mu Chen had probably only trained in this spiritual art for no more than a month, yet he was able to have a breakthrough. This talent is quite extraordinary. As expected from a person who obtained the qualifications for the spiritual road, Teacher Mo smiled. Although he lost a year of training when he was at the spiritual road, it would not be hard for Mu Chen to chase up with his talents. It seems that the West Branch's Lu Mubai had finally met his opponent. Mu Chen naturally did not know about the commotion in the cultivation field. He was still immersed in the wonderful feeling as his spiritual art made a breakthrough. The spiritual aura that flowed into his body turned into traces of dark black spiritual energy and entered his aura C. This refreshing feeling made Mu Chen feel completely relaxed. Mu Chen's mind entered the aura C. The traces of dark black spiritual energy had now become a small form. The spiritual energy would wrap around each other in spirals. It was like a black nebula, mysterious and unpredictable. Above the spiritual energy, a piece of black paper quietly floated there. It let the spiritual energy flow around it and remained motionless as if it was a dead object. The dark black spiritual energy circulated inside Mu Chen's aura C. Suddenly, a buzzing sound rang out in the depths of his soul. This made him shocked, and he immediately scanned inside his body. he actually discovered that dark black lights suddenly lit up in his body. Swoosh! The spiritual energy in his aura C also seemed to activate at this moment. It surged out of his aura C and flowed through his meridian smoothly. When the spiritual energy passed through the dark black lights, Mu-Chen was able to feel vaguely that the black color lights absorbed some of the spiritual energy. What is this all about? This sudden turn of events shocked Mu-Chen. These black lights appeared too suddenly, and it seemed to be out of his control. He was not able to detect them as well. Could it be because of the Great Pagoda art? Mu-Chen thought quickly. Then an idea flashed through his mind. It was obvious that this change was related to his Great Pagoda art reaching the foundation level. These lights! Mu-Chen's mind swept through the mysterious black lights across his body. He pondered for a while, and then he violently trembled. He noticed that if he was able to connect the black lights, it seemed to be a bit like a spiritual pulse? Spiritual pulse? This phrase flashed through Mu-Chen's mind and flooded his mind with questions. He knew that he did not possess even the lowest level, human-level spiritual pulse. To confirm this result, he checked it many times. However, what on earth are these black lights that appeared in his body and seemed like a spiritual pulse? When Mu-Chen's mind was completely filled with shock, these black lights seemed to vanish quietly like an epiphyllum. No matter how Mu-Chen tried to sense it, he could not perceive it at all. It was as if it had never existed in the first place. How could this be? Mu-Chen muttered inside his heart and was completely confused. After a long time, he began to carefully analyze it. The scene earlier was definitely not an illusion. In the depths of his body, something that he could not detect was definitely hidden inside. And this concealment might have some relationship to the Great Pagoda art. The Great Pagoda art. Could it be Mother? Mu-Chen's heart trembled. The Great Pagoda art was left behind by his mother. If that's the case, then it must be related to his mother. Perhaps his mother hid something within his body. But why would she do that? Mu-Chen thought for a while, but he could not come up with any answers. He had too little memories about his mother. There was only a vague yet gentle existence in the depths of his heart. However, he did not understand much about it. The hidden spiritual pulse feeling did make Mu-Chen believe one point doubtlessly. His mother would never do anything that would harm him. When he thought about this, Mu-Chen's heart gradually calmed down. No matter how irrational his prediction was, it would be fine if he believed that it would not harm him. As for the other points, he could ask his dad when he returned back home. He felt that his dad should know a bit about this, but he had not mentioned it to him yet. While thinking about this, Mu-Chen also circulated his state of mind. He allowed the traces of dark black spiritual energy to be absorbed into his aura C and left the cultivation state. His tightly closed eyes also slowly opened up. When he opened his eyes, Mu-Chen could feel that something was off. He was immediately surprised when he saw the numerous gazes fixed onto his body. What is it? Mu-Chen blinked his eyes. He was quite puzzled about the gazes staring at him. When the surrounding students heard his words, their faces were quite strange. You've caused such a big commotion, yet you didn't even know? Mu-Chen, are you all right? Tang Chener asked worriedly. Then she explained the situation that previously occurred. I'm fine. Mu-Chen suddenly smiled as he shook his head. This spiritual art breakthrough must have been related to the spirit convergence array. Otherwise, it would take a bit of time before he reached the foundation level. A third-rank spirit convergence array was definitely quite extraordinary. Today's cultivation lesson will end now. You can make your own arrangements for the time afterwards. When Teacher Mo noticed that Mu-Chen had woken up, he gave him a nod before he spoke to the crowd. Yes! Many students respectfully responded. Teacher Mo waved his hand, and he did not wait as he walked leisurely out. As Teacher Mo left, the atmosphere within the cultivation field gradually relaxed. Sounds of laughter spread out, but many gazes were still fixed on Mu-Chen. Perhaps it was because the commotion caused by Mu-Chen was too shocking. Even after Teacher Mo left, Luo Tong, Zhang Li, and the others did not come looking for trouble with him. Instead, they glanced sullenly at him in fear and immediately shifted their gaze away. Let's go as well. Mu-Chen stood up and clapped his hands as he spoke. Where are we going? Tang Xianer asked. Let's go take a stroll to the spiritual art room. Mu-Chen stared at the other side of the cultivation field and smiled slightly. I am quite interested in a few attack spiritual arts there. Right now, I can finally train in them. The spiritual arts room. It is the place where the Northern Spiritual Academy's spiritual art collection is located at. The spiritual arts room is also divided into heaven level and earth level. An earth class student can only enter the earth level to search for spiritual arts. If they want to enter the heaven level, then they must ascend to the heaven class. The spiritual art that Mu Chen wanted was in the heaven level collection. He had entered the heaven level once under Teacher Mo's guidance approximately half a year ago. There he discovered a spiritual art that he liked. However, he could only temporarily give it up as he did not reach the requirements. And now Mu Chen, who had satisfied the requirements, would naturally think about this attack spiritual art right away. Mu Chen and Tang Chen headed off to the spiritual arts room. On the other hand, Tan Qingshan did not follow as he said that he wanted to train for a bit longer. He was a man of few words, but he was quite stubborn. When he was still in the earth class, he was considered quite outstanding, but once he entered the heaven class, he suddenly fell to the bottom. This difference became his motivation. In the spacious spiritual arts room, many Northern Spiritual Academy students were reading the spiritual arts. After all, not every single person had a Northern Spiritual Realm's territory lord as their father. Therefore, many students could only obtain spiritual arts through the spiritual arts room. However, it was naturally worse than the carefully prepared spiritual arts that Mu Chen and the others could access. Of course, this does not mean that the Northern Spiritual Academy's collection is inferior to the territory lords within the Northern Spiritual Realm. It was the exact opposite. Based on what Mu Chen knew, the true collection within the Northern Spiritual Academy was probably something that his father's collection couldn't compare with. However, those spiritual arts were not something that a common student can see. The spiritual arts room's earth level was lively and bustling. When Mu Chen and Tang Qian entered, they attracted a lot of attention. It was evident that Mu Chen was known throughout the Northern Spiritual Academy after the battle during the academy competition. Brother Mu! It was fine when the West Branch students saw Mu Chen. Their eyes would be filled with fear and curiosity. However, the East Branch students would have thrilled expression and greeted him with excitement. A few charming girls would even peek at the boy with black hair and black eyes, handsome face, and a brilliant smile, which emitted warmth to their hearts as they flipped through the spiritual arts. Then, their faces would turn slightly red. Mu Chen directed a gentle smile towards the East Branch students, but he did not remain there for long. He directly passed through the earth level with Tang Qian and headed to the spiritual arts room's second level. Heaven level. As the two individuals departed, whispers erupted in the earth level. Brother Mu really ascended to the heaven class. He is actually able to enter the spiritual arts room heaven level. Ha ha ha. Brother Mu's performance at the academy competition was so perfect. Would it even be difficult for him to enter the heaven class? There are many powerful individuals in the heaven class. It was said that the heaven class's Luo Tong tried to trouble Brother Mu today. That guy is at the level of a spiritual movement stage late phase. Luo Tong! He's only a person who would flaunt his father's title around. How could he compare to Brother Mu? And that guy isn't even eligible to enter the 5 great academies. Yes, the one who is best qualified to compete with Lu Mubai in the Northern Spiritual Academy is probably Brother Mu. Oh ho ho, I think that there would be a good show when they compete for a place in the 5 great academies. I didn't expect you to be that popular in the Earth class. As the two of them walked up to the heaven level, Tang Qian glanced below and said with a tender smile. Mu Chen also smiled, but he was not willing to say anything about it. He turned his gaze towards the heaven level. This place was not as spacious as the earth level. There were also far less people here. However, they would still be able to see a figure walking around from time to time. What spiritual art did you want? I think that a Mu territory's young master would not care about a common tier spiritual art? Tang Qian's eyes swept through the heaven level as she playfully asked. However, if it's the spiritual tier spiritual arts, then based on what I know, there are only 6 of them in the heaven level. They are all spiritual tier low-rank spiritual arts. Which one did you like? And if you want to read the spiritual tier spiritual art, you must have Teacher Mo's consent. It seems that you know this place quite well. However, the one I want aren't the spiritual arts that you mentioned. Mu Chen let out a mysterious smile, and he walked to the west corner of the spiritual arts room. Tang Qian was a bit puzzled as she followed him over. This location wasn't where the high-ranked spiritual arts were located at in the spiritual arts room. They were all just common tier spiritual arts. Although it included a few powerful spiritual arts, with Mu Chen's viewpoint, there should be many within the Mu territory if he only wanted common tier spiritual arts. They are just a few ordinary common tier spiritual arts. It can't be that you wanted these spiritual arts, right? Tang Qian'er's slender hand picked up a jaded script and asked with a frown. Mu Chen's face had a smile on it. His long fingers went across the cold stone surface and extended into the depths of the stone cabinet. When he pulled out his fingers, a dark red jaded script was stuck between his fingers. This is... Tang Qian'er was stunned when she saw that. Her eyes immediately turned serious when she saw the color of the jaded script. This is because the spiritual arts with that color has a special title to it. It was known as Hazard Potential Spiritual Arts. The so-called Hazard Potential Spiritual Arts represents that there is quite a bit of danger when training in this spiritual art. It might even harm the practitioners as well. Let me see that. Tang Qian'er extended her hand and snatched the dark red jaded script away from Mu Chen's hand. She glanced across it and saw that it emitted a few cold-blooded words on its surface. Common tier high rank, limitless death seal. Limitless death seal? Tang Qian'er's face finally changed. Her eyes widened up and she stared furiously at Mu Chen as she spoke. What are you playing? You dare practice this spiritual art? The name of the limitless death seal, she had naturally heard of it before. Although it was a common tier high rank spiritual art, it was a spiritual art that was extremely vicious within the Northern Spiritual Academy. This is not because it was incredibly amazing, but because two gifted and outstanding students had once trained in it. The result ended with their meridians snapping, and they nearly became useless. Since then, nobody dared to train in this spiritual art. I've investigated this spiritual art before. It is actually quite amazing. However, there's a condition for you to train in this spiritual art. That is, it requires a domineering spiritual energy. The spiritual energy of the two seniors that trained in it before did not reach that level of domination. This is why they failed, Mu Chen explained. The dark black spiritual energy he had was far from any ordinary spiritual energy. With its overbearing nature, the great pagoda art that he trained in right now should be capable of this limitless death seal. Not allowed! Tang Qian'er had a straight face, and she batted an eye towards Mu Chen and said, and you don't have the qualifications to read this spiritual art anyways. There were also rules regarding about reading the spiritual arts within the spiritual arts room. If it was just any ordinary common tier, any students could read it. But if it was spiritual tier, you must ask for permission from the teachers. Although this limitless death seal only seemed to be a common tier high rank, it was classified as a hazard potential spiritual art. If you wish to read this spiritual art, you must be a student who had stayed in the heaven class for half a year. Since Mu Chen had just ascended up, he clearly wasn't qualified. Mu Chen's black eyes contained traces of a smile as he stared at Tang Qian'er. He jokingly said, "That is why I brought you over here. I wanted you to help me borrow this spiritual art." Tang Qian'er's beautiful eyes could not help but widen up. She stared at Mu Chen, gritted her teeth as she tilted her head away. "You want me to help you? No way!" "Sister Qian'er, help me out, please." Mu Chen's body leaned slightly forward. His handsome face was close to the girl's pretty face. The hot air that came from his breath landed on her bouncy cheeks. Tang Qian'er was startled by his action and retreated a few steps backwards. Her face was like a sunset and she embarrassingly said, "You rascal." Mu Chen shrugged his shoulders and his black eyes stared at Tang Qian'er. He softly said, "I really want to train in this spiritual art. Believe in me, it will be fine, okay?" Tang Qian'er nibbled her red lips as if she was hesitating. After all, this spiritual art had quite the vicious name. If Mu Chen also became like the two seniors from before, she really couldn't imagine how dire the consequences would be. "Huh? Mu Chen? You're also here?" And just when Tang Qian'er hesitated, a soft voice rang out suddenly from behind. Mu Chen and Tang Qian'er lifted their heads. They saw Hong Ling, who was extremely charming, in a red dress standing there. When Mu Chen noticed Hong Ling, he was stunned for a bit. This seemed to be the first time that Hong Ling had greeted him since he had entered the Northern Spiritual Academy. Although they were rather close when they were young, they drifted apart later. Right now, she felt more like a stranger. "Hello, Senior Hong Ling." Mu Chen also smiled and called out Senior Hong Ling. This made Tang Qian'er relax her straightened face. By greeting her this way, it was evident that they weren't close. It was more like being polite. Hong Ling's beautiful eyes flashed for a moment. She immediately looked at the dark red jaded script held within Tang Qian'er's hand and seemed to understand something. She smiled and said, "What is it? You want to borrow this hazard potential spiritual art?" Do you need my help? Mu Chen glanced at Tang Qian'er for a moment. These two girls disliked each other. Sure enough, the latter had a cold expression. He turned his head back and smiled as he spoke. Thank you for your kindness, senior. But Sister Qian'er has already promised to help me. Hong Ling nodded. She looked at Boy with a gentle smile, handsome appearance, and a long body. Her heart felt slightly sour. The ordinary boy that she did not pay attention to had suddenly become outstanding without her knowing. Then that's okay. I won't disturb you. Hong Ling directed a smile to Mu Chen. Then she did not remain at this location. She turned her body around and left. Her slim and charming body attracted countless gazes from nearby boys who were reading the spiritual arts. In the end, the boys all gave a jealous glance towards Mu Chen. This guy is really too lucky. He had some sort of relationship with both flowers of the Northern Spiritual Academy. When did I agree to help you? Seeing that Hong Ling departed, Tang Qian'er let out a sigh and spoke. I guess I can only ask Senior Hong Ling then, Mu Chen said helplessly. You dare do that? Tang Qian'er hurried and said it out loud. But seeing Mu Chen's playful expression, her face turned red, and she gritted her teeth in anger. She said, I can help you, but you have to promise me this. If you find anything wrong with it, you must immediately stop training in it. Mu Chen nodded his head. Also, Tang Qian'er's beautiful eyes swept across Mu Chen, and her pretty face revealed a sweet smile. You have to form a team with me during the Northern Spiritual Field Training half a month later. The Northern Spiritual Field Training? When Mu Chen heard these words, he was slightly stunned. The Northern Spiritual Field was a famous danger zone within the Northern Spiritual Realm. It had a vast territory and a variety of fierce spiritual beasts were spread across it. There would be many adventurer teams that entered it to hunt spiritual beasts. Also, there were many rare materials and elixirs within the Northern Spiritual Field. It could be considered as a treasure place. Of course, if you want to take the treasure out, you must have sufficient strength to do so. Otherwise, you might not be able to obtain any treasure and lose your life there. Because the Northern Spiritual Field was filled with resources, even Mu Chen's father would personally lead his men into the Northern Spiritual Field from time to time. Every time they entered, they were bound to have many tragic fights. That's right. We, the Northern Spiritual Academy's Heaven class, would organize the students and head to the Northern Spiritual Field for training every now and then. This is because only a true battle would have the effects of tempering oneself. Tang Qian'er nodded and smiled as she spoke. For the training, we are permitted to form a two-man team, and the top 3 teams that have the best results would have a special reward. Reward? What is it? Mu Chen lifted an eyebrow. It said that it would be accumulation elixir this time. Tang Qian'er thought for a moment and said, Accumulation elixir? Mu Chen was astonished. This elixir was said to be extremely beneficial for beginners like them, who had only started their training. The elixir's medical effects were mild and it would not leave any after effects. With their spiritual movement stage middle phase strength, they would soon charge at the spiritual movement strength late phase if they were to take it. Yes, if I am able to obtain an accumulation elixir, I should be able to advance into spiritual movement stage late phase. And I would begin my preparations to enter the spiritual rotation stage in the future, Tang Qian'er said. How would they judge the results? Mu Chen asked curiously. It was obvious that the accumulation elixir had piqued his interest. It's simple. They will look at who killed the most spiritual beasts and which ones is the highest rank. Tang Qian'er continued to speak. Because all the students in the Heaven class are allowed to participate, therefore there is quite a bit of competition. This is also why I want to get you. I only reached the spiritual movement stage middle phase. Shouldn't you look for someone stronger when you form a team? With Sister Qian'er's charm, I believe that many powerful individuals in both the East Branch and West Branch would want to form a team with you, right? Mu Chen smiled and asked. You're not willing? Tang Qian'er let out a slight Then she waved the dark red jaded script within her hand. That's something that I would wish for. However, if we fail to obtain the accumulation elixir, please do not blame me for dragging you down. Mu Chen smiled. The words he said weren't just common courtesy. After all, he only had the strength of a spiritual movement stage middle phase. There are many candidates that were more suitable than him in the Northern Spiritual Academy. Tang Qian'er thought for a moment. Then she let out a light laugh. It doesn't matter if we fail to obtain it. I am confident that I would reach the spiritual rotation stage within a year, even if I do not rely on the elixir. As she said this, her slender fingers gently twirled the jaded script. She glanced towards Mu Chen and said, And I don't like forming teams with others. Since Sister Qianer thinks so highly of me, I will sacrifice my life and accompany you. Don't worry, Sister Qianer. Even if I have to risk my puny life, I will definitely help you obtain the accumulation elixir. Muchen had a smile on his face as he pretended to be heroic and patted his chest. What a sweet talker. Tang Qianer blushed as she stared at him. Then what about this spiritual art? Muchen smiled as he stared at the jaded script in Tang Qianer's hand. Don't do this again next time. Tang Qianer grunted. She held on to the spiritual art as she turned around and headed towards the outside of the spiritual arts room. When Muchen noticed this, he immediately followed. At the door of the spiritual arts room, Tang Qianer registered the spiritual art. When the old man that manages the spiritual arts room noticed the dark red spiritual art, he glanced at Tang Qianer and hesitated for a moment. After all, this limitless death seal had a vicious name attached to it. Although Tang Qianer met the requirements, he still did not want to see a beautiful girl being harmed by this spiritual art. When Muchen noticed the old man hesitating, his heart was slightly anxious. He knew that the spiritual arts room's old man Qin was an extremely inflexible person. As long as he did not like a person, then that person would not be able to bring any spiritual arts away from his place. Also, don't judge based on his appearance. He may seem like he is about to die, but his strength is at the level of spiritual rotation stage late phase. He is just a step away from reaching the spirit stage. In the past, many cocky students suffered because of him. Fortunately, Tang Qianer seemed to have some method on dealing with this old man. Her pretty face let out a pure smile and she called him Grandpa Qin. This made the old man nod his head cheerfully. After he warned her repeatedly, he still handed the spiritual art to Tang Qianer. Muchen followed Tang Qianer out of the spiritual art room silently. The latter let out a triumphant smile and threw the jaded script towards him. It's all thanks to you. Muchen caught the jaded script and fiddled around with it for a moment. Joy appeared in his black eyes. Then he gave a smile towards Tang Qianer. If it wasn't for Tang Qianer today, then it would still be difficult to borrow it out from that old man Tai, even when he qualified for it. Tang Qianer smiled. She stared helplessly at the jaded script in Muchen's hand. You should be careful. If anything is wrong, you should immediately stop training in it. Yes, then I'll head back first. As Muchen held the jaded script, he already couldn't wait to start deep down inside. He waved towards Tang Qianer and quickly left. The girl stared at Muchen's figure as it quickly vanished. She could not help but pout. That blockhead. The cold moonlight poured down from the sky and turned into a beam as it landed in the quiet room. Inside this room, a boy was quietly sitting cross-legged. His black eyes stared at the dark red, jaded script that was gripped tightly in his hand. Muchen stared at the jaded script for a moment. Then he gently let it touch his forehead. As the spiritual energy circulated, the jaded script's surface also flashed a dark red light. And as the light flashed, a large amount of information flowed out from the jaded script and directly injected itself into Muchen's brain. Muchen closed his eyes tightly and accepted the training method for the limitless death seal. Shortly after, he opened his eyes and let out a breath. Within his black eyes, it was filled with theories. After all, the limitless death seal had an extremely vicious name before. Therefore, Muchen did not dare to be too careless. Instead, he repeatedly looked at the training method before he began to start training in it. Muchen sat down cross-legged and his hands were attuned to each other. His fingers wounded and formed an exquisite seal. He moved his mind and dark black lights flashed on his body. A trace of dark black spiritual energy began to linger around his palm. The dark black spiritual energy was like a black snake. It would constantly twist in his palm as Muchen changed the seals. It gradually formed into a faint black light seal. However, condensing this light seal was not easy. Thus, a faint sound rang out, and the twisting dark black spiritual energy shattered before the seal was condensed. Muchen did not mind this first failure of his. If this limitless death seal was successfully learned this easily, he would not have that big of an interest in it. Muchen refocused his mind and began again. Failed and failed. The time passed by quickly, yet Muchen continued to train in it tirelessly. The seal that was formed in his hands were gradually becoming more proficient, and the condensing speed of the spiritual energy also increased rapidly. His slender hands were like a butterfly passing through flowers. It changed at a curve. Within his palm, the dark black spiritual energy was being twisted. The black light seal was a lot clearer than before. A faint, cold fluctuation emitted out from it. Muchen firmly fixed his eyes onto the dark light seal that was about to be formed. His mind was strained to its limit. He had failed at this final step many times. Mu Chen's fingers changed once again, and a dark black spiritual energy flowed into the black light seal. The black light seal suddenly trembled. A humming sound came from it. Afterwards, the black light began to converge, and it directly formed into a dark black light seal and was imprinted onto Mu Chen's palm. When the light seal was imprinted onto Mu Chen's palm, his entire body tensed up. This is because the next step was the most dangerous one. The two seniors that trained in the limitless death seal had snapped their meridians at this step. As the black light seal was imprinted onto his palm, Mu Chen was quickly aware of a violent fluctuation emitting from the light seal. Then it rushed ferociously through the meridians at his palm. This appearance was like it was trying to destroy the meridians. However, it was lucky that Mu Chen was prepared for it. A dark black spiritual energy rumbled and rushed out from his aura sea. It then collided with the violent fluctuations. A low humming sound erupted from within Mu Chen's body. The fluctuations from the limitless death seal were abnormally violent. It was like a wild beast as it charged towards the dark black spiritual energy which sealed it off. It attempted to destroy it. However, the dark black spiritual energy that came from the Great Pagoda art was not like it imagined. It was obvious that it was not easy to deal with it. Facing against the violent impact, the dark black spiritual energy completely exposed its domineering nature. It used an extremely powerful oppression and completely resisted the impact. Bam! Waves of impacts continued. However, Mu Chen did not dare to relax the slightest bit. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. If he failed to block them, he would probably be gravely injured. Mu Chen drew out all the spiritual energy within his aura sea and tried his best to defend against the impacts. The impacts lasted approximately for 10 minutes, then it finally began to weaken. When Mu Chen discovered that the impact had completely vanished, his tensed body limped down. Sweat covered his clothes and he was breathing heavily. Although his body was abnormally tired, Mu Chen still held excitement within his eyes. He trembled slightly as he opened his right hand. At the center of his palm, there was a dark seal engraving that made others feel a chill. Did I succeed? Mu Chen stared at the black seal engraving in the center of his palm. The corners of his lips were raised and a smile of relief appeared. Northern Spiritual Academy, training ground. Many students were sweating as if it had rained. A loud and clear cry, mixed with vitality, spread out far away. Mu Chen was sitting under the shades of a tree. He lazily leaned on the trunk as he stared idly at the various heated duels. It was obvious that these duels did not interest him. Oi, although you have excellent results right now, you shouldn't be so sloppy, right? A slender figure suddenly blocked Mu Chen's view. Then, Tang Qianer's voice playfully rang out. Mu Chen stared at the slim waistline in front of him. Then, he slowly moved his eyes up. The girl's apricot color dress, slightly lifted up soft chest and slender figure, made her quite attractive. As he looked at the girl's beautiful face, Mu Chen did a stretch and said, "It's not that I'm acting sloppy, but these duels are useless to me." In the spiritual road, he did not know how many times he experienced battles of life and death. At that location, nobody was able to use any spiritual energy, thus they must push their minds to the limit and use their wisdom. Just a little bit of negligence and the cruel fate of being disqualified would occur. Then, they would only be able to wait at the safety zone until the trial was over. And compared to that place, the gentle duels between students in the Northern Spiritual Academy would have no effects on Mu Chen. You only know how to boast. Tang Qianer hummed softly. Yet her beautiful eyes could not help but look at the comforting face of his. There was a gentle smiling intent in his black eyes as well as a sense of calmness deep inside that not many people possess at his age. It made others slightly immersed in them. Tang Qianer also sat down beside Mu Chen. She then stretched out her slender hands and unlocked her ponytail. Her bluish-black hair suddenly poured down like a waterfall. The scene was so touching, and it instantly attracted a lot of attention over. Envious looks were thrown to Mu Chen in the end. This person really is great to have such a treatment. That's right. How did your training in the Limitless Death Seal go? There weren't any problems, right? Tang Qianer tilted her head and she asked with her eyebrow lifted. Mu Chen smiled. He extended his palm over towards Tang Qianer. In his palm, a looming black seal slowly came out while emitting a cold chill. You succeeded? Tang Qianer gently opened her mouth as she made a shocked expression. She could not help but immediately grabbed onto Mu Chen's hand and stared at the black seal on his palm. Her fingers poked at the black seal. A cold chill penetrated through it and made her body shiver. It can only be considered as succeeding the first step, but it must be continuously nurtured by my spiritual energy. Mu Chen shook his head and he moved his gaze. He noticed that a lot of eyes were heating up in the surrounding and immediately let out a soft cough. He said, "You'll pull in a lot of hatred for me if you continue to do this." Only then did Tang Qian'er recover. Her face instantly turned red and she quickly let go of Mu Chen's hand. Not that far away, Luo Tong stared at this scene. His eyes were a bit sulky. Tang Qian'er was the East Branch's flower. He naturally liked her as well. Moreover, Tang Qian'er's father was also one of the Northern Spiritual Realm's territory lord. His father had once mentioned that if he was able to obtain Tang Qian'er's love, then their strength would increase tremendously after the Luo territory and Tang territory teamed up. This idea was definitely good, but Luo Tong did not manage to obtain this girl's heart like his father had wished for. Instead, Tang Qian'er treated him quite cold. This made him extremely frustrated, and now he saw how close Mu Chen and Tang Qian'er were, and he was naturally jealous. "Brother Luo, that guy really is insolent." Zhang Li and Teng Yong stood beside Luo Tong and jealously stared at Mu Chen as they spoke. Although they were unhappy seeing this scene, they knew that Mu Chen wasn't that easy to deal with. Therefore, they did not act arrogantly as they would usually and pick a quarrel with him. He is only just a newbie that recently entered the heaven class, yet he dares put on airs in front of me. Luo Tong's eyes were dark and his eyes immediately turned around. He stared at Tan Qingshan, who was sweating like mad as he trained nearby, and let out a cold smile. "Zhang Li, go find Tan Qingshan and have a duel with him. Remember, you must take good care of the newbies." Zhang Li was startled for a moment. He hesitated and said that Tan Qingshan has a good relationship with Mu Chen. If I were to cause trouble for Tan Qingshan, then Mu Chen would probably... "I'm here. What are you afraid of?" Luo Tong frowned as he asked. When Zhang Li noticed the dissatisfaction within Luo Tong, he did not dare to say anything more. He immediately got up and walked quickly towards Tan Qingshan. Tan Qingshan, who was in the middle of his training, noticed that Zhang Li was coming for him. He frowned for a bit, but he did not say anything as he was not very talkative. He continued to practice a fist technique. "Tan Qingshan, I'll have a duel with you for a bit. This way you will be able to improve much faster. As an old hand, I should take care of you newbies," Zhang Li said as he directed a malicious smile towards Tan Qingshan. After the surrounding students witnessed this, they immediately understood what Zhang Li wanted to do. However, nobody dared to say anything because of Luo Tong's dark gaze coming from nearby. This kind of duel was definitely quite normal. "These guys are really going too far." When Tang Qian'er saw this scene, she immediately frowned. She tried to get up, but her wrist was pulled by Mu Chen. "What is it?" Tang Qian'er looked at Mu Chen suspiciously. It was obvious that Luo Tong and the others troubled Tan Qingshan in order to allow Mu Chen to see it. It could be regarded as a deliberate show of strength as a warning. Although Tan Qingshan is silent, he has a stubborn personality. Sometimes he does not need any help. "Do not underestimate a man's pride," Mu Chen said faintly. "The act of old hands bullying newcomers would appear everywhere. If I were to come forward and help him, it might allow him to be less troubled. However, this isn't something that he needs. Moreover, in extreme situations, he might even drift apart from me. So in order to avoid this kind of trouble, he must use his own abilities to tell the others that he isn't someone that everybody can just bully." "But he isn't Zhang Li's opponent," Tang Qian'er said. "Victory isn't just about beating down the other." Mu Chen smiled slightly and said, "As long as he is able to let the others know that he isn't a pushover and that they would have to pay some sort of price in order to push him around, it is fine." Tang Qian'er thought for a moment. She felt that there was some truth within Mu Chen's words. However, she still hesitated and said, "Even though you're younger than me by a year, why did you pretend to be so old?" Mu Chen smiled. He looked at Tan Qingshan, whose face color changed. The latter clenched and loosened his hands in a cycle. He seemed to struggle for a bit before he stared towards Mu Chen. Mu Chen gave a smile to Tan Qingshan and gently nodded. Seeing Mu Chen smile, Tan Qingshan gripped his hands tightly. Fierceness appeared within his eyes and he coldly said, "Then, Senior Zhang Li, please advise me." Zhang Li was startled when he saw that Tan Qingshan actually accepted and immediately let out a sneer. He really is a boy who had no idea of his own limitations. The two individuals slowly retreated backwards and many students surrounded them. However, it was obvious that many of them felt that Tan Qingshan was really unlucky this time. Under the crowd's gaze, the duel instantly began. It was just like everyone had expected. This duel was simply one-sided, as their strength was at different levels. However, everybody's sympathy gradually changed shortly after, because they saw Tan Qingshan continue to charge at Jiang Li without the slightest fear of death. Even when he was repeatedly kicked down by Jiang Li, he did not show any signs of surrendering. The crazy, imposing manner coming from his red eyes even shocked Jiang Li. Bang, bang, bang! The two figures interweaved at the grounds. Although Tan Qingshan was quite helpless, he risked being hit by Jiang Li a few times in order to bite at him. When Jiang Li blew away Tan Qingshan again with his fist, the latter continued to pounce forward and bit into his arm. It left a bloodstain. Jiang Li finally could not stand the mad, wolf-like imposing manner and retreated a few steps. He shouted out, "You're crazy!" Tan Qingshan ignored it, and he pounced forward again with his red eyes. "I quit!" Jiang Li hurriedly escaped. He screamed out loud as he stared at Tan Qingshan's red eyes. The surrounding students rushed forward and pulled at Tan Qingshan. However, the latter was overly crazy right now, and they failed to stop him for a moment. This scene made many students tremble. This Tan Qingshan was truly crazy. Under the surrounding students' shouts, Tan Qingshan gradually calmed down. He had cracked lips, his entire body was filled with pain, and a bruise was even on his face. However, his eyes were filled with excitement. In front of him, Jiang Li's clothes were also ripped a lot. Although he did not have any injuries, his filthy face and the horror in it were visible to everyone. Tan Qingshan might have lost in strength, but he won in terms of imposing manner. This was enough to make the other heaven-class students look at him with new eyes. Tan Qingshan wiped the blood from his mouth and looked towards Mu Chen. The latter smiled and gave him a thumbs up. "Amazing!" Tan Qingshan rubbed his head and smiled. He felt gratitude towards Mu Chen, as he had given him a chance to win back his pride with his own efforts. In the future, there aren't many old hands that would probably come to bully him. That guy has quite a crazy nature. Tang Qianer also smiled. Tan Qingshan's craziness earlier even made her slightly alarmed. Mu Chen smiled as he nodded his head. Then he stood up. "What are you doing?" Tang Qianer asked suspiciously. Tan Qingshan did what he was supposed to do. "Next, it's my turn. Others tried to show their strength as a warning, so I must pay them back. Otherwise, it would be quite troublesome." Mu Chen smiled and he gripped his right hand tightly. "Also, I wanted to find a person to test how powerful the limitless death seal is." Mu Chen slowly walked forward. Then, under many people's gazes, he entered the grounds and stared at the gloomy Luo Tong. "Senior Luo Tong, I recently learned a spiritual art, and I wanted to invite Senior over to give me some guidance. I hope that you would advise me as well." When Mu Chen's voice rang out in the training ground, the lively atmosphere suddenly quieted down. Then countless astonished eyes remained fixed on him. Who would have imagined that Mu Chen would actually take the initiative to fight with Luo Tong? Could it be that he did not know that the latter was always finding an opportunity to trouble him? Why would he go on his own and charge at him now? "Chener, what is Mu Chen doing? That Luo Tong isn't that easy to deal with." Mo Ling went up to Tang Chener and asked with a serious expression as he stared at Mu Chen's back. Tang Chener shook her head. Although her eyes showed a bit of worry, she did not reveal it. She only let out a shallow laugh and said, "It's fine, he knows what he is doing." Mo Ling could only give a bitter smile as he nodded. This duel followed the rules. Even if he wanted to speak out and help him, he could not step in. He can only hope that Mu Chen had a bit of skill. Otherwise, Luo Tong probably would not let go of this opportunity of tormenting him. Ho ho! While being surrounded in many gazes from nearby, Luo Tong was stunned. His originally overcast face slowly turned cold. From his mouth, a cold laugh slowly escaped his lips. "Looks like you believe that you've gotten used to the place after staying at the Heaven class for the past few days. So you can finally begin to act arrogant?" Luo Tong stood up. His eyes were coldly fixed on Mu Chen. "What are you saying? I simply want to have a little duel with you." Mu Chen chuckled with a gentle smile as he spoke. "Also, isn't it something natural for a senior to have a little duel with newcomers?" That's what Jiang Li said earlier. Over at the side, Jiang Li's facial color changed unnaturally after he heard Mu Chen mentioning him. However, he deliberately pretended to be fierce as he glared at Mu Chen. In his heart, he wondered why this guy would dare to cause trouble for Luo Tong. Could it be that he didn't know that Luo Tong had the strength of a spiritual movement stage late phase? Luo Tong stared at Mu Chen's handsome face, which wore a gentle smile. In his heart, however, he was extremely furious. That smile seemed like it was mocking him, but he also coldly grinned and said, "Since you have that desire, then as your senior, I should agree to it. Might as well. Might as well." After saying those three words, the coldness in Luo Tong's eyes was undisguised. From the surface of his body, a tyrannical fluctuation was emitted as spiritual energy slowly entwined and escaped from his body. The students nearby spectating all quickly moved back a bit as if they were afraid that they would be caught in it. Mu Chen extended his fists. "Please." Luo Tong did not hold back at all. As the color of his face darkened, he released his spiritual energy without reservation. He took a step forward and shot forward like an arrow. Accompanied with the sound of an explosion, his fist blasted outwards and it relentlessly charged towards Mu Chen. When the spectators saw how ferocious Luo Tong was, they were shocked. How was this a little duel? Luo Tong obviously had the intention to beat up Mu Chen. Mu Chen looked at the quickly approaching Luo Tong. However, he did not have any intention of fleeing or hiding. A dark black spiritual energy wrapped around his fist. He then took on a stance to take the blow head-on and collided directly against Luo Tong. He wanted to get a good grasp on the strength of a spiritual movement stage late phase. A low sound reverberated out as their fists collided heavily. Both parties' spiritual energy smashed against each other and formed energy waves. It instantly caused strong whirls of air to appear around them. The energy waves swept across the area, and the two figures were both shaken. Mu Chen trembled and was pushed back a number of steps. On the other hand, Luo Tong was only pushed back one step. It was evident that Luo Tong had the upper hand in a direct confrontation. Regardless of how impressive your spiritual energy is, there will still be this difference in level when facing against me. Even if I suppress you, I can suppress you to death. Luo Tong's eyes were cold. He was in the spiritual movement stage late phase, while Mu Chen was only in the middle phase. Although it might seem like a small difference, the difference was enough to oppress the other. Didn't your father tell you to just swallow your pride and behave if you don't have the capability? Since you've taken the initiative to come, you're bound to lose face. After hearing this, Mu Chen gently laughed as he said, "While I was learning how to endure, you were still in school being a good little boy. And the reason why I need to endure is because I met someone I couldn't beat at that point of time. But how regretful in my eyes, you don't amount to much. Then let me tell you what kind of price you will need to pay today." A hint of dreariness appeared in Luo Tong's eyes. He extended two fingers, forming it into a blade as a dark green energy violently surged out. At his fingertips, a sword blade seemed to appear and disappear as it emitted out a sharp fluctuation. "Great Luo's sword technique?" Upon seeing the glowing green sword tip emerging from Luo Tong's fingers, their expression changed and they shouted in shock. "The Luo territory's Great Luo's sword technique?" Mu Chen's gaze swept past the glowing green blade. Spiritual tier low rank, Great Luo's sword technique. This is the technique that made the Luo territory's territory lord famous. He never imagined that Luo Tong would have trained in it. However, judging from its appearance, it wasn't up to standard yet. However, it was already a very impressive feat to execute it at the spiritual movement stage. Swoosh! Luo Tong didn't give Mu Chen any time to think. He had a cold gaze as his body charged forward. His fingers were like a long sword. As his fingers cut through the air, he violently stabbed towards Mu Chen. Wherever the blade passed, the air seemed as if it was torn apart. Mu Chen's eyes were focused solely at sword tip coming from the violent stab. This sharpness was enough to give someone goosebumps. He slowly clenched his right hand. A dark black spiritual energy circulated through his body. It was infused endlessly into the center of Mu Chen's right palm. The looming black seal in his palm gradually emerged at this moment. A cold fluctuation poured out. A dark black light fiercely emitted out from Mu Chen's palm. At this moment, Mu Chen seemed to be holding a black sun. The cold fluctuation coming from it made others alarmed. Mu Chen stamped with his foot and his figure leaped forward like a leopard. He chose not to dodge and met directly against Luo Tong's fierce and aggressive move. The spectators were all dumbfounded when they saw this scene. "Go to hell!" Luo Tong shouted out gravely. The glowing green sword did not slow down as it streaked forward like a lightning towards Mu Chen's throat. The fist, which contained a dense black light, was also thrusted forward at the same time. A black light, which was like a sun, directly collided against the glowing green sword tip. Violent spiritual energy fluctuations exploded out. It felt as if the ground quivered as well. However, the eyes of the students remained fixated at the place where the green sword tip collided with the black light. Break! Mu Chen's eyes flashed a cold light. Within his Orsia, spiritual energy was being poured out without restraint. The black seal also violently trembled in the center of the palm. It actually appeared in front of his fist and landed heavily onto the glowing green sword tip. Kacha! The black seal blasted out, causing the glowing green sword tip to pause for a moment. Then everybody heard a slight breaking sound. Soon after that, they widened their eyes as cracks appeared on the glowing green sword tip. In the end, the glowing green sword tip shattered completely. A hint of horror appeared within Luo Tong's eyes as his body shot back helplessly. Mu Chen did not follow up with an attack. The black seal vanished as he flipped his palm. Moreover, the fluctuations also gradually dissipated. However, the spectators didn't make a single sound. They stared in astonishment at the slender figure. It was obvious the unthinkable had just happened. Mu Chen not only blocked Luo Tong's greatest skill, he even managed to force him to pull back. How could this be? Zhongli and Teng Yang were stunned as watched this scene happen. Luo Tong, who was a spiritual movement stage late phase, actually lost to Mu Chen, who was only a spiritual movement stage middle phase. As Mo Ling witnessed this scene, his heart was flustered. Tang Chener let out a breath of relief and she relaxed her slender hand. This guy is truly impressive. Senior Luo Tong, thank you. Mu Chen cupped his hands at Luo Tong as he chuckled. However, his eyes were fixed on his own palm. The black seal has faded quite a bit. If it's just based on power, this limitless death seal would not be at the level of a common tier high rank. It might only be a common tier because the requirement on having a certain degree of domineering spiritual energy was too high. However, the consumption of spiritual energy was enormous for the limitless death seal. The earlier attack had consumed half of his Orasia's spiritual energy. Although it was his first time controlling it, so it was not perfect, even a spiritual tier low rank spiritual arts can't compare to its consumption. Luo Tong's face turned pale. He didn't think that the results would end up like this, so he couldn't speak for a few moments. Mu Chen's earlier aggressive attack shocked him greatly. In that instant, he felt a great danger. This guy actually had such a powerful spiritual art. Did his father prepare this for him? Luo Tong gritted his teeth as he thought. He had practiced this great Luo's sword technique for a very long time before it came to fruition. Yet he still lost to Mu Chen. Just how many tricks did he have? Mu Chen did not care about Luo Tong, who was reading too much in it. He achieved his goal of frightening Luo Tong. This guy will probably restrain himself in the future. Therefore, he clapped his hands and turned away to leave. Mu Chen, come with me for a bit. As he turned away, a faint voice suddenly appeared from nearby. He was slightly shocked, and he saw Teacher Mo standing not so far away from him as he tilted his head over. Mu Chen was stunned. He exchanged gazes with Tang Xianer for a moment. Under the watch of many students, he hesitated for a moment before following Teacher Mo. Upon nearing a quiet forest, Teacher Mo stopped walking. Then he turned his body and narrowed his eyes. His voice gradually became more severe, and he said, "You've trained in the limitless death seal?" Mu Chen stared at the serious expression on Teacher Mo's face. He could not help but let out a hollow laugh. Then he nodded his head. With the latter's spirit stage strength, it was obvious that he could not hide it from him. "You shouldn't have the right to train in it yet," Teacher Mo said in a deep voice. Mu Chen blinked, but he did not speak. He had already trained in it already. Could it be that he'll make him return it back? Teacher Mo stared at Mu Chen's face. His serious expression faltered for a moment. It seems that this boy did not care about his authority. He could only shake his head helplessly and say, "Can you not be this reckless? I only wanted to try it out. If there are any problems, I will immediately stop training in it. I care about my life more than anyone else." Mu Chen smiled and replied. Teacher Mo could only stare at him sourly. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Did you succeed?" "I succeeded in its initial step." Mu Chen stretched out his hand. In the center of his palm, a black seal appeared vaguely. Teacher Mo stared at the black seal in Mu Chen's hand. The corner of his lips twitched slightly. Although he was aware of it earlier, his heart could not help but tremble when he saw that Mu Chen was able to successfully train in this limitless death seal in such a short period of time. This talent, as expected from the person who obtained the qualifications for the spiritual road. "Are you interested in this limitless death seal?" Teacher Mo glanced at Mu Chen. Ever since he brought Mu Chen to the spiritual arts room heaven level, he discovered that Mu Chen took a fancy to this spiritual art. I could feel that this spiritual art isn't that simple. Mu Chen thought for a moment before he spoke. Although this spiritual art may only seem to be a common tier high rank, he could faintly feel that something was a bit off with it. Oh? Teacher Mo lifted an eyebrow and stared at Mu Chen. It feels that this limitless death seal seems to carry a great potential. The training on the surface seems to be the initial step. I feel that there should be some sort of method to make this limitless death seal even stronger. Mu Chen muttered to himself. Teacher Mo slightly narrowed his eyes. A trace of surprise surged through his eyes. Mu Chen stared at Teacher Mo and suddenly let out a smile. He said with a cunning voice, Teacher Mo should be quite familiar with the limitless death seal, right? From what I can tell, you seem to be quite interested in it. Teacher Mo glanced at Mu Chen, who was like a sly fox. He helplessly nodded his head and said, I too have trained in this limitless death seal. As he said this, he extended out his palm. In the center of his palm, a black seal also appeared on it. However, the one that came from Teacher Mo was a lot more completely and darker than the black seal at the center of Mu Chen's hand. The cold chill fluctuation also far surpassed the one that Mu Chen formed. Mu Chen stared at the black seal in Teacher Mo's hand in shock. He gently smiled as he said, It really is just like I expected. This spiritual art really isn't that simple. Otherwise, why would Teacher Mo select it? Teacher Mo is a genuine powerhouse at the spirit stage level. He is ranked high up in the northern spiritual realm. If the limitless death seal was only just an ordinary common tier spiritual art, he would not go train in it. You rascal! Teacher Mo gave off a bitter laugh. This boy is quite slippery. He thought for a moment and slowly said, Do you want to know how to let the limitless death seal reveal its true power? Mu Chen's eyes lit up. He nodded his head heavily. It's simple. Teacher Mo chuckled and he extended his left hand over as well. Then Mu Chen was astonished as he noticed that there was an exactly the same black seal at the center of Teacher Mo's left palm. So with the limitless death seal, you could form more than one death seals. Mu Chen's eyes glowed. A touch of excitement suddenly appeared on his face. He stared heatedly at Teacher Mo and murmured, The reason why there weren't any other steps for training the limitless death seal isn't because there weren't any. It is because the amazing point of the death seal is that you could form multiple death seals. By overlapping the death seals, you will be able to reveal its true power? Teacher Mo nodded and said, However, the limitless death seal has a harsh requirement for spiritual energy. I have tried my best, yet I was only able to form 2 seals. As for the death seals, the more you have, the more terrifying the backlash from the impact would be. I had once attempted to form the 3rd death seal, but I was nearly gravely injured by its shock. After that, I did not dare to try it again. Mu Chen also had the same feeling. When he formed the 1st death seal, he went through great lengths just to withstand the impact coming from the formation of the seal. He really did not know if he could endure the 2nd seal being formed. Right now, you have successfully formed the 1st death seal. Do not rush to condense the 2nd seal, just so an accident wouldn't occur, Teacher Mo warned him. Mu Chen nodded. Although he longed for the true power of the limitless death seal, he also understood there were no benefits for being too ambitious. Seeing this, Teacher Mo did not say anything more and waved his hand. Mu Chen immediately turned and left. The moment he turned his head around, he saw Tang Xianer waiting for him. Are you all right? Did Teacher Mo do anything to you? Tang Xianer immediately asked these questions when she saw Mu Chen coming out. After all, Mu Chen did break the rules a bit when he learned the limitless death seal. Therefore, she was worried that he would be punished. Mu Chen smiled as he shook his head. Then he lowered his head and looked at the black seal in his palm. His heart heated up. This limitless death seal was truly extraordinary. It looks like he would have to put more effort into it in the future. In the middle of the night, Mu Chen was quietly sitting cross-legged. His hands were changing seals again. A trace of dark black spiritual energy circulated at the tips of his fingers. Kacha. However, when the dark black spiritual energy weaved together and attempted to form a seal, the spiritual energy suddenly went out of control and the fluctuation dissipated away. Mu Chen stared at his empty palm. He shook his head helplessly. Just earlier, he attempted to see if he could form the 2nd seal, but the results were obvious. He failed. It seems that the difficulty for the 2nd death seal was much harder than the 1st one. Looks like I can only slowly do this, Mu Chen muttered to himself. Then he recovered his mind and closed his eyes. He began to circulate the great pagoda art and absorb the spiritual aura from the world. In the end, the spiritual aura turned into dark black spiritual energy and entered his auracea. In addition to this, Mu Chen would also separate a bit of his spiritual energy and let it flow down the meridians in his arm in order to nurture the Black Death Seal. It made the color of the Black Seal become deeper. Because of the fight with Luo Tong yesterday at the training grounds, Mu Chen's reputation also spread out within the East Branch Heaven class. The veteran students did not dare underestimate this newbie, who just rose up. Also, Tan Qingshan made others understand that he wasn't a seemingly quiet boy who would be pushed around with his fierce attitude yesterday. Therefore, nobody came to trouble him in the days after. Mu Chen had truly obtained peace and quiet. During this peaceful time, Mu Chen began to focus his efforts into cultivation. He would be at the cultivation field to borrow the third-rank spirit convergence array at daytime. The spiritual energy within his auracea became denser and denser as the days passed. When it was nighttime, he would nurture the limitless death seal on his palm. He also gradually attempted to form the second death seal, but without any exception, he failed. But despite the repeated failures, Mu Chen did not give up. He could vaguely feel that he was getting more proficient in the seal method for forming the limitless death seal through the repeated failures. His control at the limitless death seal became more and more smoothly. The feeling of him getting closer and closer to success made Mu Chen experience a little bit of joy. The time quietly went on, and in a blink of an eye, approximately half a month passed. During this half a month, the spiritual energy inside Mu Chen's auracea became denser and denser. Although he had not advanced to the spiritual movement stage late phase, it was definitely more powerful than half a month ago. While his spiritual energy progressed, Mu Chen's training in the limitless death seal also became more proficient. His control over the first death seal reached a certain degree of precision. It was not like when he was facing against Luo Tong and would cause unnecessary consumption. As for the condensation of the second death seal, Mu Chen could faintly feel that he had reached it. However, his spiritual energy wasn't enough, so he was not able to condense it successfully. This made him feel a bit regretful. In the cultivation field, when Mu Chen heard that the bell ringing, which represented that the class was over, he opened his eyes and began to feel the spiritual energy surging in his auracea. He smiled gently and stretched. "Hey!" A sweet voice came from beside him. Mu Chen tilted his head. He only noticed Tang Qianer smiling as she stared at him with anticipation. "What is it?" Mu Chen asked. "We will be heading for training at the Northern Spiritual Field tomorrow." Tang Qianer smiled as she said, "We're heading out tomorrow?" Mu Chen paused for a moment before he smiled and nodded his head. He was completely immersed in his training during this time, so he nearly forgot about the time. However, it was still fine. Seeing that he could not form the second death seal because he did not have enough spiritual energy. If he was able to find some elixirs in the Northern Spiritual Field, it would solve his pressing problem. You have to work harder during this time's Northern Spiritual Field training. It is said that the West Branch's Liu Mubai will also participate. The one that formed a team with him is the West Branch's Hong Ling. We can't lose to them, Tang Qianer said seriously. Liu Mubai, huh? Mu Chen let out a slight smile. That person is the genuine #1 in the Northern Spiritual Academy. And are they going to confront each other for the first time during this Northern Spiritual Field training? How interesting. Mu Chen's black eyes shined. He was not afraid of anyone in the spiritual road, and it was exactly the same in the Northern Spiritual Realm. That wraps up the content for today's episode. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to get notifications for the next episode. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.